I've been stuck in this world for almost 3 years now. Ever since I transmigrated here, life's been nothing but bad luck. Droughts, failed harvests, empty rice jars. I'm broke, alone, and according to that cursed system panel floating in front of my eyes every night, I've only got about 6 months left to live. So when Wu Jiming, the village chief's son, came knocking at my door telling me to sign up for the Army's wife giveaway program, I figured, why not? The deal is simple. You enlist as a soldier, and in return, they let you pick a woman to take home. These women are war captives, families of enemy soldiers, daughters of fallen officials. If nobody picks them, they get sold to brothels. It's a rough world. Jiming's real reason for pushing me, though? He's scared his own wife might sneak into my bed one night. I'm not bragging, but I've got a face that turns heads. Half the married women in our village can't stop whispering about me, and apparently some of them moan my name while they're with their husbands. So yeah, every married man in the village wants me gone, or at least tied down with a wife of my own. I agreed. What's the worst that could happen? I'm dying anyway. Might as well enjoy married life for a few months before I go. Next morning, I headed to the town with Jiming, old bachelor Li Daong, and 2 other young guys from the village. When we arrived, there were already dozens of single men lined up. The army brought out about 100 women, lined them up in rows, and the picking began. What surprised me was how every man ahead of me went straight for the big-hipped, sturdy-looking women. The good-for-bearing sons type. Nobody cared about beauty. One guy, Wang Wei, even had a gorgeous woman practically begging him with her eyes, but he slapped the curvy girl's backside and said, "This one," without a second thought. The pretty one looked furious, but also relieved. Li Daong did the same thing. So did the 2 guys from our village. One by one, they all picked the thick, practical-looking women and left. By the time my turn came, only 12 women were left. They were all desperate. Whoever I didn't pick would end up in a brothel. They started shouting over each other, listing their skills, trying to sell themselves. Then one woman caught my eye. She had pale skin, a noble air about her, and she looked like she didn't belong here at all. Turns out she was Xia Qingzhu, though I didn't know her story yet. She spoke up with a mix of panic and pride, almost commanding me to choose her. I asked what special skills she had. She blushed and said she knew martial arts and could do the splits. That got my attention. I grinned, raised my finger, and pointed at her. She exhaled with relief, but then, right at the last second, I moved my finger away from her. The look on her face went ice cold. Just as Xia Qingzhu's face went pale with despair, I waved my hand and said what I'd been planning all along. The remaining 12, I'll take them all. The clerk spat out his tea. Even the military commander, Chao Tian, looked stunned. He warned me that 12 extra mouths to feed during a famine year was no joke. I just smiled and told him the village would help out. Behind me, Wu Jiming looked like he was about to pass out. He'd promised to handle my food situation, but he never expected me to pull something like this. You never said you'd only take one, I reminded him. He had no comeback. Most of the women looked at me like I was their savior. Better to share one husband than end up in a brothel serving hundreds. The only exception was Xia Qingzhu. She shot me a look of pure contempt, probably thinking I was just a greedy pervert. But even she had no choice but to accept it. The commander gave us 1 month at home to carry on the family line before we had to report for military duty. Deserters would be executed on the spot. On the walk back, I squeezed Jiming for everything I could, food, bedding, the works. Every time he tried to negotiate, I just threatened to go, discuss things, with his wife. That shut him up fast. Back at my broken-down little courtyard, I showed the 12 women around. 3 rooms, 1 bed. Not exactly a palace. I suggested numbering them 1 through 12 to keep things simple. That's when the power struggle started. Xia Qingzhu stepped forward first, announcing she was a princess of the great Xia dynasty and obviously deserved to be number 1. Before I could respond, another woman sauntered out, Su Su, apparently a famous courtesan from the Qinhuai River. She wrapped herself around my arm, pressing close, and told Qingzhu that a clueless virgin had no business leading anyone. Qingzhu fired back that a woman anyone could buy for the night had no right to be in charge either. Things were getting heated, so I cut them both off. I told them I'd watch their performance over the next few days and decide later. Su immediately took charge of the house repairs, telling me to just relax in bed and wait to be taken care of. She knew exactly what she was doing with every word and every glance. Qingzhu was fuming, calling her a shameless fox spirit. I announced that Su would join me tonight, along with 2 others of my choosing. Then I looked straight at Qingzhu. She panicked and said she'd never share a bed with that fox. Su seized the moment and suggested I punish Qingzhu by skipping her dinner and making her wash my feet instead. I agreed without hesitation. Qingzhu couldn't believe I was punishing her. No dinner and foot washing duty. I told her straight, obey or I'll send you back to the army. That shut her up. Jiming finally showed up with food and blankets before dark. He tried handing over just 5 days' worth of grain, claiming that's all the village could spare. I saw right through him. I casually mentioned I'd go door to door thanking every family personally and asking exactly how much they donated. His face went red instantly. Suddenly he remembered there was actually a full month's worth of supplies. He ran off to get the rest. Su noticed my little trick. I caught her looking at me differently after that. That night, Su and the twin sisters, Yanhong and Qinghe, shared my bed. The twins were daughters of a high-ranking official who'd been framed and executed. They were grateful I'd taken them in. The night was long and intense. Qingzhu and the others couldn't sleep in the next room, listening to everything through the walls. She cursed Su for being so loud. When I woke up the next morning, I felt incredible, not tired at all. Then I checked my system panel and nearly jumped out of bed. My remaining lifespan had gone from 6 months to 2.5 years. I'd also gained 2 skills, arrow through 100 paces, and ears that hear all directions. My stats had tripled. The hearing skill kicked in immediately. I could pick up the twins whispering in the kitchen 10 meters away, through several walls, talking about how sore they were. As for the archery skill, I needed to test that. Behind our village there's a mountain full of wild game, but a huge tiger showed up 2 years ago and killed several hunters. The government bounty was up to 100 silver taels, and nobody dared claim it. With 13 mouths to feed, I needed that money. I borrowed a bow from old Hunter Zhang. He laughed when I said I could hit targets at 100 paces. So I showed him, drew the bow like I'd done it my whole life, fired one shot that punched clean through a tree trunk 100 steps away, pinning a lizard in the process. The old man nearly fell over. On my way home, I tested again, 150 paces, easy. Enough range to fight a tiger safely. Back at the house, I found trouble waiting. A girl named Lu Lin had shown up with her brothers, screaming at me. Apparently, I'd once turned down marrying her over a 5-tael bride price, and now she was furious I'd taken 12 women home instead. Su opened the gate and told them to stop barking. Things almost got violent, but I stepped in, traded insults with the men until they had nothing to say, and told Lu Lin to go find her dream husband elsewhere. She stormed off swearing she'd make me regret it. Inside, I had Su sharpen my only axe for the mountain trip. She figured out I was going hunting and, without me asking, pulled out a gold hairpin she'd been hiding, her emergency savings, and offered it to me for household expenses. That impressed me. She was already thinking long-term, investing in our future together. Smart woman. Then I turned to Qingzhu and asked if she was hiding anything valuable too. She panicked and swore she had nothing. I gave the other women a look, and within seconds they'd playfully stripped her bare, searching everywhere. She curled up on the floor, furious, insisting there was nothing to find. I glanced at her tightly clamped legs and pointed out there was still one place they hadn't checked. When the women pried Qingzhu's legs apart, I was genuinely surprised. She'd actually hidden something there. A blood-red pearl, beautiful and clearly worth a fortune. She went crazy trying to grab it back, naked and crying, saying it was the only keepsake from her dead mother. The other women were already talking about selling it for houses and furniture, but I looked at her sobbing on the floor and tossed it back. It wasn't about being nice. A poor nobody like me suddenly selling a royal treasure would only bring trouble. I told Su to grab a switch if Qingzhu cried one more time. The tears stopped immediately. She glared at me with murder in her eyes, but I could tell she wasn't actually angry anymore. That morning, I headed into the mountain with my bow and axe. I caught some rabbits and pheasants along the way, but my real target was the tiger. I gutted the small game and left the bloody mess in a clearing as bait, then climbed a tall tree about 60 paces away and waited. A black bear came first, huge thing, taller than a man. Before I could decide what to do, the tiger exploded out of the forest. 500 or 600 pounds of pure muscle. It tore into the bear, and they fought brutally. This was my chance. While they were locked together, I fired 3 arrows straight into the tiger. It roared so loud I nearly fell out of the tree. No wonder 10 experienced hunters had failed. That sound alone would make most men freeze. I emptied every arrow I had into both beasts. The bear died first, gutted by the tiger. The tiger collapsed too, but it lay there staring up at me, blood foaming from its mouth, gathering strength for one last attack. I didn't dare breathe. We stayed like that, me in the tree, the tiger on the ground, until sunset, when it finally died. I skinned both animals and took the bear paws too. The carcasses were nearly 1,000 pounds combined, way too heavy to carry, but the hides and paws alone were worth serious money. The tiger's scent would keep other animals away, so I could come back for the meat later. When I got back to the village, I found a crowd of 20 or 30 men gathered outside my house. They'd heard the tiger's roar that afternoon and decided I must be dead. Already they were dividing up my property, my house, my grain, and my 12 wives. One guy was openly claiming he wanted, the one who screamed the loudest last night. Su was standing at the gate, face white with fury, but outnumbered. Then the village chief, Wu Senku, Jiming's father, stepped forward playing the wise elder. He put on a sad face and proposed everyone donate money for my funeral, then rank who gets what based on how much they gave. Nobody fell for it. When no one volunteered cash, the old fox sighed dramatically and announced he'd, reluctantly, move into my house himself to protect the 12 women. He was practically drooling. He started his little farewell speech. Pingon, rest in peace. Your Uncle Wu promises to take good care of your 12 wives. That's when he saw me. I was standing right behind the crowd, 2 bloody animal hides dripping over my shoulders, grinning at him. Take care of my what? I didn't quite catch that, village chief. Why don't you say it again for me? When the village chief saw me standing there with bloody tiger and bear hides over my shoulders, his face went white as paper. I told everyone I'd killed the tiger and a black bear too, and that from now on, the mountain was safe for hunting again. I tossed the hides at the doorstep and watched the crowd scatter like mice. To keep the village on my side, I told them they could have the tiger carcass up on the mountain. The whole thing was worth good money, bones and all. I just asked them to save me some of the skeleton. Their eyes lit up, and they forgot all about stealing my house and wives. They grabbed tools and rushed up the mountain before dark. The chief played along, calling me a hero, then slipped away before I could say anything about his little speech. Inside the yard, my women surrounded me, relieved and grateful. Su asked why I gave away so much of the tiger. I explained, in 1 month I'd be gone to war. If I left these villagers with nothing, they'd bully my wives the moment I disappeared. But now I was the local hero who cleared the mountain, and they owed me. They'd think twice before causing trouble. The women understood, and I noticed even Qingzhu watching me quietly from the doorway with a softer look in her eyes. I put Qingzhu on tiger hide cleaning duty. She protested, so I gave her 2 options, wash the hide, or share my bed tonight. She chose the hide without hesitation. That night, Su asked who I'd pick. The twins were still recovering, could barely walk, so they were out. I chose the 2 smallest girls, Yang Lin and Lu Xiaoyang, both 17, daughters of captured enemy soldiers. They were nervous and asked if I could wait until they fell asleep before starting. Apparently Qingzhu had been scaring them all day, telling them horror stories about the night before. Su stepped in and calmed them down with her own colorful description of things, and the girls got curious enough to agree. It was another long night. Qingzhu stuffed her ears and cursed from the other room. By morning, I checked my system panel again. 2 more first times meant 2 more years of life. I was up to 4.5 years now. I'd gained a new skill too, strength to move mountains. My body felt incredibly powerful, like I could wrestle that tiger barehanded if I had to. I was starting to understand how the system worked. Every new first experience added to my lifespan and unlocked abilities. The endurance stat was obvious. It governed stamina and bed. The potential stat still puzzled me, but I wasn't complaining. Su lay on my chest, exhausted, begging for mercy and swearing she couldn't go another round. I just grinned, picked her up with one arm like she weighed nothing, and flipped her upside down. She sighed and asked if I was trying to make her mouth too swollen to eat. That morning I headed to town with the tiger's skin, bear skin, and bear paws stuffed in sacks over my shoulder. On the way, I overheard traders talking about a gang of bandits targeting merchants on the road, robbing them, and leaving no survivors. I kept that in mind. At the biggest shop in town, I laid out my goods. The clerk's eyes flashed with greed for a split second before he put on a bored face and offered me 10 silver taels. I picked up my sacks and turned to leave. He immediately asked me to negotiate. He went to the back room to consult the boss, and that's when my supernatural hearing kicked in. Through the walls, I heard every word. The boss recognized the tiger's skin as nearly priceless, big enough that the tiger was close to becoming a legendary mountain lord. He wanted to gift it to a military general's 50th birthday celebration. He told the clerk to pay me up to 500 taels if needed. Then came the real kicker. The boss said it didn't matter what they paid, because I wouldn't make it home alive anyway. So the shop was connected to the bandits. Good to know. The clerk came back and offered 50 taels. I said 500, take it or leave it. He pretended to agonize, then agreed. I took 450 in banknotes, 40 in silver, and the rest in copper coins. The clerk smiled like he'd won. He thought I was a dead man walking. I spent part of the money on gifts for my women, small things, plus fabric, supplies, and writing materials. I loaded everything onto a carrying pole and headed home looking like a traveling merchant. Sure enough, at a narrow mountain pass, 5 armed men jumped out. The leader told me to hand over my money or die. I set down my load, pulled out my axe, and smiled. I asked if they worked for the shop owner. The leader's face darkened. I knew too much. One of them charged with a sword. I hurled my axe straight into his chest, splitting him open. The other 4 rushed me together. I grabbed the dead man's sword and swung it with everything I had. Pure brute force, no technique. I cut through all 4 of their blades like they were sticks. The leader tried to run. I buried my axe in his shoulder and took his whole arm off. The other 3 fled in terror. The leader begged for his life. I told him to bring back all the people he'd murdered first. Then I cut him in half. On his body, I found something interesting. Half a martial arts manual called Thunder Rush Blade, soaked in blood. He'd been carrying it around trying to learn it. Lucky for me, he hadn't mastered it yet. When I opened the manual, something strange happened. The words swam off the pages like tadpoles and poured into my mind, turning into moving figures demonstrating every technique. My system flashed a message. The skill was now at beginner level, costing 1 potential point. So that's what potential was for, instant learning of any martial art. I was basically a natural-born fighting genius. I swung the dead man's sword to test it out. A thunderclap sound exploded through the forest, and trees crashed down in a wide arc around me. That's when I noticed something in the freshly cleared brush. 2 bare white backsides sticking up in the air, and from the sound of running water. They belonged to women. Turned out it was a woman squatting in the bushes to relieve herself. When she spun around and saw me staring, she went absolutely berserk, screamed about me being a pervert, and came at me with a sword. Her name was Zhan Honglu, the top female constable from Fengxian County, sent here to investigate the bandits. Problem was, she saw the 2 dead bodies on the ground and assumed I was the killer bandit she'd been hunting. No amount of explaining would change her mind. We fought. Her swift wind blade technique was fast and sharp, roughly equal to my freshly learned Thunder Rush blade. After 10 exchanges, we were dead, even in skill, but I had far more raw strength. I swung hard enough to snap both our swords in half and sent her flying backward. She got up, realized she couldn't beat me, and declared she was only losing because she was tired from traveling. Then she used some incredible light-stepping technique to leap away through the treetops like a dragonfly on water. I couldn't help thinking out loud how nice it would be to learn that skill for sneaking into women's bedrooms. She heard me from several trees away, lost her balance in fury, and fell right out of the canopy onto her backside. Some expert. She swore she'd come back and kill me. I shrugged and headed home. Near the village, I noticed red lanterns hanging at my gate and a wooden sign reading, "Tiger Slaying Hero." The whole village was buzzing about me. I didn't care for the attention, so I shooed everyone away and went inside. The women crowded around me. Tea, shoulder rubs, the full royal treatment. Su handed me 100 silver taels the government had sent as the tiger bounty reward. Combined with the 500 from the shop, I was suddenly rich. 2 days ago, I couldn't afford rice. Now I had 12 beautiful wives and over 600 taels. I gave Su the 100 taels to manage as household money and told everyone I planned to expand the house. Add more rooms so we wouldn't all be crammed together. Their eyes lit up. Then I handed out the little gifts and fabric I'd bought in town. Su tried to refuse, saying they were already lucky enough just to have me. I returned her gold hairpin too, telling her no wife of mine needed to spend her own savings. I asked if anyone could sew. Ding Ning stepped forward, the plainest looking of the 12, dark-skinned and thin, but hard-working and honest. She said she could handle simple patterns. Then I noticed Qingzhu sitting alone under the eaves, looking left out and miserable. I walked over and held out the last hairpin. She refused it immediately, saying she didn't want my charity. I shrugged and said fine. She could be the household maid instead of a wife. She snatched the hairpin so fast her face turned red. I leaned close to her ear and whispered that since she'd accepted my gift, tonight was her turn. I wanted to see that famous splits move of hers. But first, she'd need to put on something I designed. I went inside and drew up a sketch. When Qingzhu looked at the design, she was completely confused. She pointed at one part and asked what the strange thing with 3 strings was, some kind of scarf. I grinned. It is a scarf, sort of. Just not for your neck. That night, just as I was about to enjoy Qingzhu's company, my ears picked up footsteps on the roof. It was that female constable from the forest, Zhan Honglu. She'd followed me home and come back with knockout gas, planning to capture me in my sleep. I heard her muttering up there about her special sleeping powder that could knock anyone out cold. So I played along. When she blew the smoke through the roof tiles, I held my breath and pretended to be unconscious. She dropped into my room, lit a flame, and gloated about catching me. Then I opened my eyes and grinned at her. She panicked, couldn't understand why her drug hadn't worked, and in her confusion did the dumbest thing possible. She sniffed the tube herself to check if it was still potent. Knocked herself out instantly. I couldn't believe it. My women came rushing in with kitchen knives, brooms, and wooden sticks after Qingzhu warned them about an intruder. They tied Honglu up tight. When they found her constable badge, everyone was shocked. She was actually law enforcement, not a thief. Su asked if I'd committed a crime. I told them it was a misunderstanding and to gag her until morning. With the intruder dealt with, I turned back to Qingzhu. Time for that splits demonstration she'd promised. That night was something else. Qingzhu took the full force of what was normally spread across multiple partners. By morning she could barely move, but she'd changed, calling me husband for the first time instead of barking orders. My system panel showed another upgrade. A new skill, light as a swallow. I could feel my body was weightless enough to leap onto treetops. My lifespan jumped to 5.5 years, and my endurance went up again. The pattern was crystal clear now. I told Qingzhu that since she knew martial arts, she should teach the other women some self-defense for when I'd be away at war. She agreed without arguing. First. Then I went to find Jiming. He opened his door looking like death, dark circles under his eyes, barely standing. He started cursing me out, blaming me for the noise coming from my house every night. Apparently the sounds had been driving his wife crazy, and she'd been working him to the bone trying to keep up. He couldn't understand how I was servicing 12 women and looking healthier every day while he could barely survive one. I told him to quit complaining and round up some carpenters. I needed extra rooms built, and I'd pay wages and provide meals. He tried to refuse, but right then his wife yelled from inside the house, demanding he come back to plow her field, and threatening that if he wouldn't, plenty of other men would be happy to. I raised an eyebrow at him. If you won't help me, I'll just help you plow that field of yours too. He grabbed his axe and followed me to the mountain without another word. The next morning, I had Jiming round up about 15 village men to help build the new rooms. I'd promised each of my wives her own bedroom with a nameplate on the door, 9 new rooms on top of the 3 I already had. When the men walked in and saw my women moving around the yard, every single one of them started drooling. Li Daong was kicking himself for only taking one wife. 2 guys, De Zhuang and Ergo, even snuck into the kitchen to lean close to Su and sniff her. I watched it all without saying a word at first. Instead, I calmly suggested they bring their own wives over to help with cooking, paid work, same rate as the men. They agreed happily, not thinking anything of it. While the men were up on the mountain cutting wood, their wives showed up to cook. Within minutes, the two women were in my kitchen joking around, trying to pull my pants down to check if the rumors were true, that I was part donkey. The whole village had apparently been kept awake by the sounds from my house, and these women were going crazy with curiosity. Right on cue, De Zhuang and Ergo kicked my gate open and started screaming about me seducing their wives. I didn't flinch. I reminded them I was paying fair wages and asked them what they called it when they were pressing up against Su Su that morning. They wanted to leave, but the double pay was too good to walk away from. They sat back down and swallowed their pride. After that, nobody in the village dared look at my women sideways. They all knew that if they tried anything with my wives, I could easily do the same to theirs, and I'd actually succeed. Meanwhile, Zhan Honglu was still unconscious in the shed, tied up tight. Her own knockout gas had kept her out for most of the day. Su Su worried we'd get in trouble for holding a government officer captive. I told her it would be worse to let the crazy woman loose. She'd try to kill me again without listening to reason. I explained the whole bandit situation to my wives. Qingzhu, surprisingly sharp about this kind of thing, said she'd seen cases like it before. She was certain the shop and the bandits were working together and probably had people inside the local government protecting them. She warned me they wouldn't let the deaths of their men go unpunished. All the more reason to keep Honglu locked up. If the authorities were corrupt, letting her report back could make things worse. By evening, the woodcutting was done and my yard was stacked with lumber. I was planning the expansion in my head when Ding Ning ran over to tell me the constable had woken up and wanted to talk. I went to the shed. Honglu, still tied up, looked me dead in the eye and laid out her deal. I release her, turn myself in, and she'd put in a good word so I'd only get 10 or 20 years in prison. I waved my hand. Keep her tied up. Gag her again. And no food or water. I'd figured out the system's rules by now. Each first time with a new woman gave me 1 skill and 1 year of life. I still had 6 wives I hadn't been with yet, so I decided to handle all 6 in one night. When I announced the plan, everyone's jaws dropped. Su Su tried to talk me out of it, saying I should pace myself. I reminded her she of all people knew what I was capable of. Even Qingzhu laughed and encouraged it. She wanted the other sisters to share the experience she'd been through. 2 of the remaining 6, Chen Shishir and Song Lianer, stepped forward nervously and confessed they weren't virgins. They'd been married before and begged me not to throw them out. I told them not to worry. Everyone has a past. Tonight was still happening, all 6. In the shed behind the hall, Honglu heard every word and cursed me under her breath, predicting I'd die from exhaustion. At dinner, Su Su brought out 2 jars of tiger bone wine she'd made from the skeleton I'd kept. The moment I drank it, my body caught fire from the inside. I was burning up, losing control. Su Su stopped the other women from fetching water and explained I needed a different kind of cooling down. The 6 remaining wives helped me into the bedroom. What followed shook the entire village awake. At one point, I apparently let out a roar, so loud people thought the tiger had come back from the dead. Poor Honglu in the shed, bound, gagged, starving, and forced to listen to everything all night without being able to cover her ears. By dawn, she'd collapsed from sheer exhaustion. When I checked my system in the morning, the results were impressive. 4 of the 6 had been virgins, giving me 4 more years of life, up to 9.5 years total. I gained new skills, night vision, and clever hands, plus 3 entire books downloaded into my brain, a medical encyclopedia, a poison manual, and a farming guide. Each one was too complex to read normally, so I spent 3 potential points to absorb them instantly. Suddenly, I had knowledge of curing diseases that stumped every doctor in this world. I also spent another point upgrading my Thunder Rush Blade to intermediate level. That left me with 5 potential points in reserve. The tiger bone wine was still burning through me even after a full night. I called Su Su and Qingzhu over for a morning session. Qingzhu whimpered that I was going to kill her. Su Su just laughed and told her she'd learn to enjoy it soon enough, maybe even beg for it. In the shed, Honglu had barely dozed off when my bed started slamming against the wall again. She screamed into her gag that I was driving her insane. By mid-morning, I was still busy inside while Jiming and the work crew sat outside my gate, too embarrassed to knock. De Zhuang's wife couldn't resist commenting that I was a real man, and the rest of them couldn't compare. Jiming told everyone to just go home. But right then I opened the door and cheerfully asked why they all looked so tired. Nobody appreciated my humor. The construction kicked into full gear. With all the wood ready, it was time to build. I kept the workers well fed, meat at every meal, which was unheard of during these famine years. Word spread, and more villagers showed up voluntarily just for a chance at a decent dinner. By evening, we had 5 or 6 tables of food set up in the yard. That's when the commotion started at the gate. Lu Lin, the girl I'd turned down before, showed up wearing a red wedding dress. Her brothers were trying to drag her away, but she was dead set on marrying me. No bride price needed, she said. She'd threatened her parents with suicide until they gave in. She marched right up and demanded I accept her, then told my wives to prepare a room because she'd be the new head wife. Su politely shut that down. If she joined, she'd be number 13, last in line. Lu Lin threw a fit, claiming she and I were childhood sweethearts, and she outranked everyone. I tried to let her down easy, told her I was heading to war soon, that I was just a poor nobody, that she deserved better. She said she'd rather be my widow than someone else's wife. Her brother Lu Laosin started threatening me. One of their brothers was in the military, another worked at the county office. I pretended to be scared and said that was even more reason not to marry into such a powerful family. Finally, Lu Laosin offered to pay for an extra room himself, plus all the furniture and supplies. Su nudged me gently. The girl had thrown away her reputation coming here like this. Rejecting her now would ruin her life. I sighed and gave in. But I made the rules clear. She'd be number 13, following the same pecking order as everyone else. And she shouldn't feel too bad about the number. The way things were going, there might eventually be a 23, a 33, maybe even 103. The constable situation was becoming a headache. 2 days without food or water, and Zhan Honglu still refused to believe I wasn't the bandit. She called me a thief and a pervert in the same breath. I finally made her an offer. Come with me to town tomorrow, and I'd show her the real criminals. If I were truly guilty, why would I have kept her alive? Su untied her and brought her a proper meal. Honglu wolfed it down like she hadn't eaten in years. Afterward, she asked Su why so many pretty women would follow, little pervert, like me. Su patiently explained how I'd saved all 12 of them from being sold to brothels, and that I treated them well. Honglu wasn't fully convinced, but she agreed to wait one more day and see. She refused to sleep in any bed I'd touched and went back to the shed. Her only request was one quiet night without the opera performance. Su winced and said it was probably too late for that. I just brought home wife number 13 that afternoon. Right on cue, Lu Lin's screaming started from the bedroom. First it was pain and crying and threats to call off the marriage. Then, after a while, the screaming changed into something very different. Lu Lin's voice went soft and amazed. She'd discovered what all the fuss was about. Honglu had been ready to kick the door down to rescue her, but stopped when she heard the shift in tone. She stood outside, face burning red, and muttered that I was lucky before walking away. The next morning, I headed to town with Honglu trailing behind. My plan was simple. Use Su's gold hairpin as bait at the same shop that had tried to have me killed. I walked in, showed the clerk the hairpin, and asked for 50 taels. The old man's eyes flickered and he went to the back room to consult the boss. Thanks to my hearing, I caught everything. The 3 surviving bandits from before were in the back room, grinding their teeth. They recognized my voice and wanted revenge. The shop owner, He Tiantang, was already planning to call in reinforcements, a group called the For Lustful Bandits, who happened to be in town. Together they'd outnumber me badly. I sat there sipping tea, weighing my odds. Even with Honglu's help, this could get ugly. So while I waited, I opened my system panel and spent another potential point to push my Thunder Rush Blade technique to its maximum level, full mastery. A flash of light filled my vision, and suddenly I knew every move of the blade art as naturally as breathing. I left the shop without selling the hairpin. The trap was set. Now I just needed the rats to show themselves. Sure enough, on the same stretch of road as last time, the 3 surviving bandits stepped out to block my path. They were hungry for revenge. I didn't waste time talking. I clapped my hands and called out for Honglu. She leaped down from the trees, furious when she realized these were the criminals she'd been hunting. But before she could act, the bandits called in their backup. The four lustful bandits, a notorious gang of rapists who'd been terrorizing the region for years. They strolled up the road like they owned it, immediately making disgusting comments about what they'd do to Honglu. Their names were ridiculous: East Lecher, West Wanderer, South Savage, North Sleaze. Real pieces of work. Honglu recognized them instantly. These four had committed terrible crimes against women across multiple counties, and nobody had been able to catch them. I figured this was Honglu's fight now, so I casually said goodbye and started walking home. She screamed at me to come back. Then she got clever. She shouted that if I left, these four would eventually target my 13 beautiful wives at home. That got the bandits' attention. They blocked my path too, demanding I lead them to my house for their entertainment. One of them, South Savage, grinned with rotten yellow teeth and offered to spare my life if I cooperated. I told him I'd need to have a go with his mother first. His face went dark and he lunged at me. I pulled my axe and brought it down with the full force of a perfected thunder rush blade strike. He split in half before he even knew what happened. The other three abandoned Honglu and rushed me together. I swung 3 times. 3 clean cuts, head to groin. The 4 lustful bandits became 8 pieces of lustful bandit. The original 3 gang members tried to run, but I hurled my axe after them. It spun through the air and cut all 3 in half at the waist. 7 men dead in seconds. Honglu stared at me in complete shock. Then she tried to stand and collapsed. The fight with the bandits had left her badly injured, and her clothes had been mostly torn off during the struggle. She lay there barely conscious, skin exposed everywhere. I knelt down and asked if she was okay. She whispered for me to save her. I warned her I'd have to touch her body. She said she wouldn't blame me. I took off my shirt, draped it over her, then spread her legs apart. She panicked and demanded to know what I was doing. Putting you on my back to carry you home. Unless you'd rather I carry you from the front, but then I'd see a lot more. She chose the piggyback ride. Back home, I treated Honglu's injuries using my medical knowledge. She was surprised I could practice medicine. I told her I could also brew poisons, and a lot more. The prescription worked fast. She was walking the next day, even though she'd taken serious internal damage from the fight. She muttered that I should be a military doctor instead of a foot soldier. That night was predictably loud. Honglu, stuck in the room next door, didn't sleep a wink. She left the next morning looking half dead from frustration. Over the following 2 weeks, the construction finished. My home was now 4 times its original size. 13 bedrooms, a vegetable garden planted with herbs and crops using my farming knowledge, and a fish pond surrounded by trees. The place was starting to look like a proper estate. I almost didn't want to leave. But the army deadline was approaching. Every day I hunted in the mountains, bringing back so much game that the kitchen walls were covered in hanging dried meat. Su had Ding Ning sew me custom armor since the military only handed out battered gear stripped from dead soldiers. At night, I made sure to spend time with every wife, no one left out. The day before I had to report for duty, I checked on everyone's health by taking their pulses. Turns out 4 of my wives were already pregnant, the twins Yin Hong and Qing He, Ding Ning, and 1 surnamed He. Su congratulated me, but I was puzzled why she wasn't pregnant too, considering we'd been together the most. She laughed and explained she had a special technique to prevent it. Someone needed to stay sharp and manage the household while I was gone. Qingzhu protested that she could run things just as well. The 2 of them started bickering again, so I shut it down with a challenge. Whoever impressed me most tonight would be named head wife. Su said she had secret techniques. Qingzhu countered that she'd upgraded her splits into something even more advanced. I stared at the sky wishing it would get dark faster. Right then, the front gate swung open. Honglu walked in wearing a new purple sash around her waist. She'd been promoted to purple rank constable, 2 levels up from where she started. She credited me for the achievement, but wasn't the type to pretend she'd earned it alone. I could tell by the timing of her visit, sunset, my last night home, that she wasn't here just to show off her promotion. She sat down under a tree and got straight to the point. Zhao Pinggan, I came to warn you. Watch out for one person. Who? The commanding general of the Kuei battalion. He Kuei. Honglu explained why I should worry about He Kuei. Turns out the shop owner who tried to have me killed was closely connected to this general. He Kuei commanded the Kuei battalion, a different unit from the Tian battalion I'd signed up for, but powerful enough to cause me serious problems. Honglu had investigated the shop, but couldn't touch the owner because of He Kuei's protection. She warned me to be extremely careful once I entered the military. That last night at home was one for the ages. Su Su and Qingzhu competed to prove who deserved to be head wife. I'll just say they both made strong arguments, and I was thoroughly convinced by morning. At dawn, I slipped out without waking them. I brought a sack of dried meat to old Hunter Zhang and returned his bow. The old man broke down crying, saying his own children never treated him this well. He promised to watch over my house while I was gone. Back home, I called Ding Ning privately and handed her 300 taels, the remaining money after all expenses. I chose her specifically because she was careful and wouldn't waste it. Su Su already had 100 taels for daily household costs, but this was the emergency fund. Ding Ning was so moved she started crying, and watching her tremble with emotion triggered something in me. I pulled her onto the bed for one last quick goodbye before leaving. At the village entrance, Jiming and 2 other young men were waiting. They couldn't resist commenting on how I looked healthier and more energetic after a month with 13 wives, while they could barely walk after a few days with one. They begged for my secret. I told them to practice stopping midstream every morning and repeating the cycle. They took careful mental notes. Li Daong showed up last, looking like he'd lost 20 pounds. Marriage was killing him. We marched to town where Commander Chao Tian was waiting. He explained the deal. 2 weeks of basic training in staff, sword, and archery, then an evaluation to sort everyone into squads. Top performers got the best units. The worst would be assigned to the kitchen, feeding pigs, washing clothes, and scrubbing toilets. Li Daong's eyes lit up at feeding pigs. He didn't care about glory anymore. He had a wife to come home to, and a safe rear position was all he wanted. Even the toilet cleaning didn't faze him. Chao Tian turned to me with an amused look. He figured that a man with 13 wives would be even more desperate to stay alive than the coward who wanted pig duty. The whole crowd laughed. Jiming jumped in defending me as the famous tiger-slaying hero, but Chao Tian waved it off. Any veteran in his battalion could kill a tiger, he said. I smiled and asked him a simple question. Which squad in his battalion was the most dangerous? He raised an eyebrow. The Dragon Squad. A few dozen men. They win every battle they fight, but they also have the highest death rate. I nodded. Sounds perfect. That's where I want to go. Everyone thought I was crazy for requesting the Dragon Squad. The other recruits whispered that killing one tiger didn't make me special. Chao Tian was surprised too, but I could tell my words caught his attention, especially when I said a soldier who doesn't want to become a general isn't a good soldier. He told me to prove myself during the 2 weeks of training first. Jiming walked us to the edge of town. When it was time to say goodbye, he got all sentimental, said he didn't know if we'd ever see each other again. Then he leaned in close and whispered his real question. Was that peeing trick I taught him actually legit? I kicked him about 10 feet through the air. As our column marched out through the city gates, I heard him jumping up and down in the crowd behind us, shouting that if I didn't come back alive, he'd take care of my 13 wives. I didn't turn around, just raised one hand and waved. Half a day later, we reached a military camp in a mountain valley. About 80 of us from the wife giveaway recruitment. But there were already over 100 recruits waiting, volunteers from wealthy families, many with prior martial arts training. Chao Tian made it clear. Those guys were on a completely different level from us. But he added that on the battlefield, everyone had the same path to promotion, killing enemies. That part was fair. Chao Tian introduced our training officer, Wang Chong, captain of the elite Alpha Squad. Cold face, no smile. He immediately rattled off a dozen rules, all punishable by 50 to 100 lashes or instant execution. No leaving camp, no drinking, no insubordination, no leaking information. When the recruits started murmuring nervously, Wang Chong announced we'd all run 50 laps around the camp before dinner as punishment for the noise. By the time we finished, it was pitch dark. I was exhausted, even with my enhanced body. We were assigned 10 men per room, and I got separated from Li Daong and the other village guys. My bunkmate turned out to be a rich kid named Wang Tingshan, arrogant, loud, and immediately started insulting everyone from our backwater town, mocking us for enlisting just to get free wives. His companion, Wei Qing, was at least polite enough to introduce himself properly. My bed was right next to Wang Tingshan's. He made a snide comment about my big bundle of supplies. asking if I'd brought my whole house. I ignored him. He took that as disrespect and got in my face, demanding to know if I was deaf. I told Wang Tingshan his breath stank, and he should brush his teeth. He got furious, but before things escalated, Wang Chong yelled at us to get to dinner. Tingshan warned me I'd pay later. His buddy Wei Qing tried to smooth things over, saying the Wang family was too powerful to mess with. I asked him if powerful families could skip the fighting and send their backgrounds to war instead. He had no answer to that. The next morning, training began. Wang Chong demonstrated a basic military combat technique. Looked simple at first, but as he picked up speed, his fists cracked through the air like thunder. It was impressive. He said it took him 10 years to reach that level, and we'd be talented if we learned half the moves in 2 weeks. Here's the thing, I had my system. While everyone else was struggling to memorize the basics during practice, I quietly spent a potential point and absorbed the entire technique instantly. But I kept that to myself and told the guys from my village I'd only picked up a tiny bit. Tingshan overheard and mocked me, saying he'd make sure to spar with me in the afternoon matches. Li Jian and Zhao Yao recognized him immediately. He was a notorious bully from the next town over. Li Daong pretended not to know any of us and slunk away. I compared Tingshan to a big yellow dog back in our village that used to bare its teeth at everyone until I broke its leg. He asked who Big Yellow was. I told him it was a dog. His face went dark. In the afternoon, Wang Chong announced sparring matches. Pairs from each barracks. Losers run 100 laps. Most fights were ugly brawls with zero technique. Wang Chong didn't care about style. He said on a real battlefield, any move that knocks your enemy down is a good move. Then came an interesting match. Wang Wei, the first guy who'd picked a wife that day at the recruitment, stepped up against a skinny fighter named Lu Bin from the neighboring town. Lu Bin was cocky, bragging about 3 years of martial arts training and his family's ancestral monkey fist technique. Wang Wei just scratched his head and politely warned he might accidentally hurt the guy. Lu Bin charged in with flashy moves. One punch later, he was flying through the air and couldn't get up. Wang Wei had used nothing but the basic technique Wang Chong taught us that morning, and he'd somehow already made it work perfectly. Lu Bin screamed about cheating. Wang Chong shut him down, told him to run his 100 laps, and repeated, on the battlefield, nobody cares what style you use. If it works, it's a good fist. I watched Wang Wei carefully. This guy was more than he appeared. The sparring matches continued. Li Daong, Li Jian, and Zhao Yao all lost their fights. Then it was my barracks' turn. Wang Tingshan volunteered first and asked if he could pick his opponent. Wang Chong allowed it. Tingshan pointed straight at me. He even asked whether breaking someone's bones during the match would get him in trouble, barely pretending it would be an accident. Everyone could see this was a setup. Rich kid with martial arts training versus a guy in patched clothes. Wang Chong gave me a way out, said I could refuse. I didn't. Tingshan came at me with a punch to the face. I kicked his shoulder before his fist got anywhere near me, snapped it clean. Then I punched him square in the nose and caved it in. Before he could even scream, I slapped him so hard his teeth flew out. Everything happened in seconds. Wang Chong rushed in and shoved me back, yelling at me to stop before I killed the guy. I smiled and pointed out that Tingshan hadn't asked for mercy yet. Truth was, the poor bastard couldn't open his mouth. It was too smashed up. I got in a few more slaps before Wang Chong physically separated us. Tingshan's face looked like a swollen pig head. Wang Chong was stuck. There was no military doctor in camp. I casually mentioned I knew medicine and could treat the injuries myself. Just a broken shoulder and a collapsed nose bridge. Nothing too serious. 2 or 3 months to heal. He had no choice but to let me handle it. That night, I set Tingshan's bones in our shared barracks. I'd warned him it might hurt. His screams echoed through the entire camp until the small hours. Nobody complained, though. They all knew what would happen if they did. Over the next few days, training continued. On day 4, Wang Chong taught us staff fighting. I spent another potential point and mastered it instantly, then dominated the sparring matches again. The other recruits started calling me a natural-born soldier. After evening drill, Wang Chong pulled me aside for a private talk. He warned me that Wang Tingshan's family was powerful, and once training ended and news got out about what I'd done, they'd come after me. He asked what I planned to do about it. I just smiled. As long as Tingshan stayed in the army, which he would, since rich kids enlisted to build political careers, His family couldn't retaliate against me without the consequences falling on him too. He was my shield. Wang Cheng warned me never to start another fight, or I'd face military punishment. I nodded innocently and mentioned that as a half-decent doctor, it was perfectly reasonable for me to carry herbs and insects around camp. And since I was only half-decent, it would be totally understandable if I occasionally mixed up medicinal herbs with poisonous ones. Wang Cheng stared at me, mouth twitching. How did the recruit camp end up with someone like you? On day 7, Xiao Tian returned with an unusual new recruit, a baby-faced bald monk named Yang Zhen. His temple had been destroyed by bandits and his whole family slaughtered, so he'd come to enlist. There were no empty beds, so I volunteered our barracks by announcing that everyone had unanimously agreed to move Wang Tingshan to the woodshed. Nobody dared contradict me. Tingshan himself confirmed he was thick-skinned and suited for the shed when I asked. Xiao Tian watched from the platform, looking completely confused about how I'd tamed the rich kid so thoroughly. Wang Cheng assigned me to train Yang Zhen on the techniques he'd missed, since I was already the best at everything anyway. Over the next few nights, I taught him boxing and staff work. He was a hard worker, but oddly refused to shower with anyone, claiming he got cold easily. I didn't think much of it. Archery training came next, and I dominated again with my 100-pace precision. By this point, nobody even reacted. They expected me to win everything. Then one night, I lay in bed pretending to sleep and overheard several bunkmates whispering about Yang Zhen. They'd noticed he never used the latrine around others, never bathed, yet somehow never smelled bad. His bedding smelled sweet, like a woman's. One guy, Zhang Zhao, actually climbed into Yang Zhen's bed to sniff it, then suggested that if Yang Zhen turned out to be female, they could all take turns. When Yang Zhen walked in and found Zhang Zhao in his bed, things escalated fast. The guys surrounded him, trying to pull his pants down to check. Yang Zhen was panicking. I got up and kicked the nearest one across the room. Everyone froze. I told them to apologize, and they did. Then I told Yang Zhen to move his bed next to mine. From now on, we'd sleep side by side, and anyone who messed with him would answer to me. He was flustered but agreed. That night, I was woken by a noise. Yang Zhen had snuck out with a wash basin in the dark. The other guys were already whispering about following him. They figured he was hiding something. Maybe he was a eunuch, or worse. They waited for me to fall back asleep, then crept out after him. I opened my eyes and followed them all. I followed the guys to the bathhouse and caught them trying to peep on Yang Zhen. I kicked them away and threatened to give them the Wang Tingshan treatment if they tried anything like that again. They scattered. I stood guard outside while Yang Zhen finished washing. When she came out, her wet clothes clung to her body, and even with the chest wrappings, the truth was obvious. I'd suspected it for days, and now I was certain Yang Zhen was a woman. I asked whether I should call her little brother or little sister. Her face went red. She begged me not to tell anyone, explaining she'd disguised herself as a man to join the army and avenge her family. I pointed out that hiding a female identity in a military camp was a capital offense, and so was knowing about it and staying quiet. She offered to do anything if I'd keep her secret. I told her my condition. Every night, she had to scratch my back while I fell asleep. She was so relieved it wasn't something worse that she agreed immediately. That night we pushed our beds together. In the dark, she reached under my shirt and started scratching my back with her soft fingers. I couldn't help myself. I reached back and wrapped my arm around her waist. She tensed up but couldn't make a scene without waking everyone. She pinched my back hard in protest. I responded by letting my hand wander across her stomach. She practically melted and forgot to fight back. A couple days later, Wang Cheng announced the final test, a 2-day wilderness combat exercise in the mountains. Everyone would be ranked by how many opponents they eliminated. You could go solo or team up. The results would determine which unit each recruit got assigned to. Li Jian and Zhao Yao rushed over wanting to team up with me, but I'd already made my choice. I grabbed Yang Zhen and announced she was my partner. She glared at me, knowing exactly what I was up to, but she didn't refuse. Being with me was safer than being with anyone else, even if I did sneak my hands into her blanket at night. Besides, as she silently admitted, at least I was nice to look at. I told her to grab 2 bedrolls from the barracks. She flinched and asked why we needed bedding. I said it was for sleeping, obviously, unless she preferred bugs crawling all over her in the dirt. She had a sinking feeling she'd boarded a ship she couldn't get off of. The 2-day exercise began. Over 100 recruits were scattered across 2 mountains, each armed with a standard military sword. The goal was simple: take down as many opponents as possible. Surrendering was allowed. Yang Zhen wanted to start hunting right away, but I had a different plan. I told her we'd spend the first day setting up camp, eating well, and resting. Strike tomorrow when everyone else was tired and hungry. She thought I was just making excuses to get her alone, and honestly, she wasn't entirely wrong. I built a small shelter on the ground first, stocked it with herbs to keep bugs away, and made it look cozy and inviting. Then I hunted 2 rabbits and 2 snakes for dinner. Yangjin couldn't figure out why I was making the place look so nice until I explained it was bait. Rain was coming tonight, and any cold, wet recruit who stumbled across a warm, dry shelter with food would walk right in. The hut was a trap, but we wouldn't be sleeping in it. I climbed a massive tree overhead and built a hidden treehouse using leaves and branches, completely invisible from below. Yang Zhen couldn't climb up on her own, so I carried her and the bedrolls up in one trip. When she saw the view from the top, the whole mountain spread out below us, she gasped. Lying in soft blankets with a roof overhead and a breeze coming through the sides, she admitted it was beautiful. I took the credit. She said she meant the scenery. Then she got embarrassed and said she needed to go down. Bathroom emergency. I told her to just go in the treehouse since the water would flow downward anyway. She protested about me watching, so I promised not to look. She had no choice but to squat right there. I absolutely looked. She called me a pervert. I corrected her. I wasn't sneaking a peek. I was watching openly. Right then, I heard rustling below. 2 recruits had wandered toward our tree, drawn by the sound of trickling water. They thought they'd found a spring. They spotted the ground shelter and figured a hunter had built it. One of them found the small warm puddle Yang Zhen had just left behind, dipped a finger in it, and tasted it. He said it was warm, slightly bitter, and had a strange smell he couldn't quite place, something that reminded him of a woman. He figured it was animal urine. Up in the tree, I signaled Yang Zhen to stay absolutely silent. She was dying of embarrassment. I dropped silently from the tree behind the 2 recruits and tossed them a red marker pen. They turned around, saw it was me, and their faces went white. They knew they had 0 chance, so they marked themselves as killed and wrote my name on their uniforms without a fight. 2 easy kills before the exercise even really started. As night fell, the storm hit hard. My plan was working perfectly. I lit a fire inside the ground shelter and started roasting the rabbits and snakes I'd caught earlier. My cooking skill kicked in. I found wild herbs to replace salt and got the meat golden brown and dripping with grease. Up in the treehouse, Yang Zhen's stomach was growling loud enough to hear through the rain. She yelled down asking if the food was ready. I told her it was bait, not for her. She called me heartless. I said she could eat if she agreed to sleep in my arms. She refused. I said fine, starve then. She lasted about 10 minutes before I climbed up and handed her the meat anyway. She grabbed it without thanking me and threatened to kick me out into the rain. Quite the attitude for someone eating my food in my treehouse. The fire did its job. A group of recruits who'd been wandering the mountain all day, cold, soaked, and starving, spotted the glow and came running. They'd already taken out 6 opponents during the day but were half dead from exhaustion. When they reached the shelter and found roasted rabbit still on the fire, one of them grabbed it. That's when I slid headfirst down from the tree canopy, upside down, right behind them. "How's the rabbit?" I asked. In the pitch dark, in the middle of a storm, seeing a figure descend from above like a ghost. They screamed, scattered, and I picked them off one by one without breaking a sweat. 6 more kills on my record. Through the first half of the night, the fire kept luring in solo stragglers. By the second half, the mountain went quiet. I let the fire die and climbed back up to the treehouse. I slipped into the blanket and bumped into Yang Zhen's warm body. She yelped. I told her I was just going to sleep. She said fine, but no wandering hands. I agreed. Then I put my hand on her stomach. She told me to move it lower. Wait. No. She told me to take it off. I moved it down. She screamed. You told me to take my hand down from your stomach, I said innocently. I did exactly what you asked. I meant take it away, not put it there, you pervert. The next morning, Yang Zhen woke up to find my hand exactly where she'd told me not to put it. She kicked me out of the blanket. By the second day of the exercise, the rain had stopped and recruits were making their final push. Yangjun said I already had enough kills to rank at the top, but I told her I wasn't worried about myself. I was worried about her. She needed good results too if she wanted to join an elite unit and learn real combat skills for her revenge. She softened up a bit, even though she'd never admit it. We set out to hunt. While moving through the forest, I heard voices above a small cliff. It was Meng Chao, the other dangerous guy in camp. He wasn't flashy like me, but he was vicious. He came from a powerful background and had already built a crew of followers through intimidation. I climbed up to watch from the treetops and saw the whole ugly scene play out below. Meng Chao had caught Li Daong hiding under a ledge. Instead of just marking him as eliminated, he humiliated him, slapped his face, made him crawl between his legs while cursing my name. Li Daong went along with it because he was terrified of getting his legs broken. I felt bad for the old guy, but also frustrated by how spineless he was. Then Li Jian and Zhao Yao stumbled onto the scene and confronted Meng Chao. They lasted about 30 seconds before his crew pinned them down. Meng Chao was about to do something truly disgusting. He started unbuttoning his pants, planning to urinate in their mouths as punishment for being from the same village as me. That's when I decided to introduce myself. I unbuttoned my own pants from the treetop directly above Meng Chao's head and let loose. My 100-pace precision skill worked beautifully. Every drop landed right on target. Yang Zhun turned away, face burning, telling me to put my pants back on. I told her to wait. I needed to shake. Meng Chao looked up midstream and realized what was happening. His face twisted with rage. He was drenched in my piss, moments after threatening to do the exact same thing to my village brothers. I dropped from the tree carrying Yang Zhun, landing gracefully. Meng Chao could tell from that move alone he was outmatched. He asked what I wanted. Simple. I spread my legs and told him to crawl through, same as he'd done to Li Daong. But my version was worse. He had to crawl back and forth while calling himself a bastard, saying his mother was a brothel prostitute who abandoned him at birth, and he didn't even know who his father was. Keep going until I said stop. Yangjun burst out laughing. Meng Chao was shaking with fury, but his two lackeys were desperately signaling him to just do it. He knew he couldn't beat me. He got on his knees and started crawling and cursing himself. Halfway through the script, he stopped. Keep going, I said. Why'd you stop? He looked up miserable. I forgot the rest. It was too long. I can't remember it all. After dealing with Meng Chao, I sent Li Jian and Zhao Yao off with enough kills to earn decent rankings. I told Li Daong I wasn't angry about the cursing. At least he'd refused to poison me, which counted for something. Then I grabbed Yang Zhun and bolted before she could protest about spending another night in the treehouse. Under a clear, starry sky, she opened up to me for the first time. Her real story came out. She was a farm girl, not a monk. A month ago, a band of horse bandits raided her village, slaughtered everyone, and hung her parents' bodies at the village entrance. She survived by hiding in a cellar and watching through the cracks. The leader was a one-eyed man with a thick beard. She'd never forget his face. She joined the army disguised as a man to get strong enough for revenge. She told me something else too. She'd sworn that whoever helped her kill her enemies, she'd give herself to that person completely. Then she looked me straight in the eye and said I should stop wasting my time on her. No matter how good I was to her, it wouldn't work. Not until her parents were avenged. That cooled me down. For about half an hour. Then my hands started wandering again up in the treehouse. She yelled at me for breaking my promise. I told her I wasn't forcing anything, just touching. Couldn't sleep without it. Force of habit. The next morning we returned to camp for the final results. Wang Chong read out the rankings. I came first with 13 kills. Second was some chubby nobody named Qin Song with 12. Turns out he'd won entirely through tricks and ambushes rather than fighting skill. Clever guy. Meng Chao placed third. Wang Wei fourth. Yang Zhun made eighth. Good enough for the top squad. The top 10 were assigned to Alpha Squad, the best unit with the highest pay and best conditions. Li Jian and Zhao Yao made Beta Squad. Li Daong got exactly what he wanted, the Supply Squad, where he could feed pigs in peace. Wang Chong told us to pack up. Training was over, and we were heading to the main camp. He warned us to write home letters because we could be sent into combat at any moment. The recruits started complaining. Too fast, no break. Couldn't they get a day off to relax? Wang Chong smiled coldly and said we were in luck. Our vacation was coming right up, and it would be very exciting. A blood-covered messenger had just galloped into camp. I was standing closest to Wang Chong and read the letter over his shoulder. Horse bandits had attacked a village called Shuangxi, 50 miles away. The forward scouts had taken heavy losses. Our recruit camp was the nearest unit. We were going to war. The order came down fast. Grab your weapons. Full march. Anyone who runs gets killed on the spot. Over 200 of us set out with Wang Chong leading. I walked beside Yang Zhen and told her to stay close to me no matter what. She nodded seriously. She didn't know the details yet, but she could feel something bad was coming. Half a day later, we smelled blood on the wind. Yang Zhen spotted it first from the hoof prints, horse bandits. Their horses had cloth-wrapped hooves instead of iron shoes to muffle the sound. She recognized the signs immediately. Her face went tight with fear and anger. Then we rounded a hill and saw Shuangxi village. It was hell. Houses burned to black skeletons. A dozen bodies, men and women, hanging from the trees at the village entrance. The men had been gutted. The women had been stripped and violated before being killed. On the branches, impaled like decorations, were the bodies of babies. Half the recruits who'd been bragging on the march about how killing was no different from slaughtering chickens vomited on the spot. The smell of blood mixed with vomit hung in the air like a fog. Our veterans were already stacking corpses into a pile. Villagers in one group, dead soldiers in another. The bandits had hit the village's garrison hard before disappearing northeast about 2 hours earlier. Wang Chong calculated we could still catch them if we took the main road while they crawled along back trails with their loot. He turned to face us and asked for volunteers to pursue. Silence. The brave talkers from earlier were suddenly fascinated by their own boots. I stepped forward. Not for glory, for those dead villagers and those babies on the tree. Yang Zhen followed immediately. I told her she was crazy. She looked at me and said, "If your entire family was dead and you were the only one left, would you still be afraid to die?" Wang Wei, Qin Song, Wei Qing, and even Meng Chao volunteered too. Eventually, about 40 men stepped up. Wang Chong told the rest to stay behind and help bury the dead, a job that turned out to be worse than fighting, since it meant handling rotting corpses for hours. By nightfall, our strike force reached the area. Scouts confirmed the bandits were camped in a valley 5 miles ahead, surrounded by mountains on 3 sides. They were celebrating, roasting meat, drinking, dancing. And in the middle of their camp, a dozen young women, stripped naked, being passed around and assaulted by the bandits. Wang Chong's jaw clenched. Animals. The problem was a sentry posted outside the camp. If we charged, he'd raise the alarm. He was 150 paces away in near total darkness, too far for a reliable shot, and a miss would ruin everything. I took the bow from the nearest veteran without waiting for permission. Drew, aimed, released. The arrow punched through the sentry's forehead and pinned him to the post behind him. He didn't make a sound. He didn't even twitch. Everyone around me went completely silent. 150 paces, pitch black, 1 shot, instant kill. Nobody had anything left to say. With the sentry down, Wang Chong gave the signal. 40 of us charged down the slope in the dark. 2 gate guards were hacked to pieces before they could shout. Then we slammed into the main camp. Some of these bandits were just desperate peasants who'd turned to crime, but others were real killers. Within seconds, one of our recruits lost his head, literally. His body kept running a few steps before it fell. Seeing that shocked everyone into fighting harder. No more fancy techniques, just hack and slash to survive. I kept Yang Zhen behind me while cutting through the bandits. 3 of them surrounded me. I used my lightweight movement skill, dodging their blades like a ghost, disappearing from one spot and reappearing at another. I took heads and limbs off 3 men in moments. Yang Zhen had her eyes squeezed shut, swinging her sword wildly. I grabbed a bandit I'd already stabbed through the heart and threw him at her feet. I told her to open her eyes and finish him. She said she couldn't. I said, "Fine, then let him finish you." I stepped back. The dying bandit swung at her with his last breath. In that instant, she saw her parents hanging from the village gate. She saw the burned houses. She screamed and brought her blade down so hard, she split the bandit's skull to his chest. Then she kept chopping and chopping until there was nothing left but meat. The remaining bandits broke and ran. Wang Chong ordered pursuit. The bandit chief in a black robe and demon mask tried to escape on horseback, using a subordinate as a human shield. I borrowed a bow and put an arrow through both of them. One shot, two bodies. He fell off his horse, dead. We killed most of them, but about a dozen escaped into the darkness. Afterward, nobody celebrated. We found the village women the bandits had been assaulting. Most were already dead. The few survivors were blank-eyed and broken. Wang Chong ordered them brought back to camp. Rules be damned. Sending them back to a destroyed village would only bring more suffering. He gave us a speech. Said this was just an appetizer. Real war would be worse. Said that protecting our families and our people was what being a soldier meant. His words hit hard. Yang Zhen was still hacking at a corpse that had long since stopped being recognizable as human. I had to talk her down before she'd let go of the sword. She collapsed into my chest and sobbed. Wang Chong pulled me aside and gave me a mission. Take a small team on horseback, ride through every village in the area, warn them about the escaped bandits, and be back by the day after tomorrow. If anything went wrong, it was on my head. I picked 3 men. Qin Song, the clever strategist, Wang Wei, the quiet powerhouse, and Wei Qing, the well-connected gentleman. We rode through the night, alerting every village we passed. By late night, we'd found no trace of the escaped bandits. Wei Qing wondered if we'd gone the wrong direction. Qin Song disagreed. The bandits wouldn't run toward our main force. They'd hide in a village, wait for daylight to pass, then move again. Bandits needed food, drink, and comfort. He suggested we stop chasing and start searching nearby villages instead, looking for signs like freshly slaughtered livestock. His logic was solid. I made the call to follow his plan. He asked if I wasn't worried about being wrong. I told him we were brothers in arms now. If I couldn't trust my own team, what was the point? If anything went wrong, I'd take full responsibility alone. At dawn, we spotted smoke rising from Peach Blossom Village and heard the unmistakable sound of a pig being slaughtered. Too early and too loud for a normal morning. Qin Song and I went in on foot, while Wang Wei and Wei Qing stayed outside. 2 young men blocked the village entrance and tried desperately to turn us away. They wouldn't say why. Qin Song flashed a silver coin, enough for a family to live on for 2 weeks, and asked to rest and eat. They almost caved, but then a scarred, rough-looking man appeared behind them and told the guards to let us in. His tone wasn't friendly. It was the voice of someone in charge. Inside the village, everything looked normal except for one thing Qin Song noticed. There were no young women anywhere. Only old women and children. The villagers kept glancing at us with terrified eyes, but their fear wasn't directed at us. It was aimed at the scar-faced man following behind. We sat down in a house. The young guard went to get water, but the scar-faced man cut him off. He casually ordered that we be stripped of valuables, killed, and buried in a ditch. Nobody outside the village would ever know. The young guard protested. The bandits had promised not to kill anyone if the village cooperated. The man laughed and said the deal only covered villagers, not outsiders. After the bandit left, the guard turned on us furiously. He'd warned us not to come in. He explained what happened. Around 4 in the morning, a dozen armed bandits had stormed the village, killed 2 people as a warning, rounded up all the young women, and demanded the village slaughter their pigs and serve a feast. The bandits promised to leave once they'd eaten, drunk, and had their fun. I asked why 300 villagers couldn't overpower a dozen bandits. The guard said they had maybe 50 able-bodied men, but the bandits were holding the women hostage, including his own wife. Any attack and the bandits would slaughter the hostages first. Qin Song tried to reassure him by claiming we had 100 soldiers surrounding the village. The guard wasn't fooled. Numbers didn't matter when the bandits had knives to women's throats. I smiled and told him I had a simple plan. No fighting needed. Just poison the pork while it cooked. He looked at me like I was the stupidest person alive. Poison was illegal, no farmer had any, and even if they did, the bandits would never let them near the food unsupervised. He called me a brainless pig. I swallowed my pride at being called a brainless pig by a guy whose wife was currently being used as a bandit's plaything. I told him to just follow my instructions. I had the poison knowledge. I could knock out a dozen tigers without anyone noticing, let alone some bandits. He didn't need to believe me. If it failed, he could claim ignorance and nothing would change for his village. The plan was simple. Qin Song and I would play dead. The young man, Zhao Chong, would tell the bandits he'd killed us as ordered. Meanwhile, I'd prepare a special mixture using wild herbs and mushrooms that looked completely normal but would knock a grown man unconscious within minutes. He'd mix them into the pork stew as a side dish. Zhao Chong brought the wild vegetables to the bandit leader in the village hall. The bastard was sitting there with Zhao Chong's wife on his lap, treating her like an animal, bruises and handprints all over her body. He made Zhao Chong watch while he got even rougher, just to humiliate him. Then he got suspicious about the vegetables and had his men check them. They were all common, recognizable plants. Nothing looked poisonous. That was the beauty of my poison knowledge. I knew combinations that were harmless individually but deadly together. The leader tossed Zhao Chong's wife back to him as a reward for being obedient. On the way out, the guard slapped her backside and made crude jokes. Zhao Chong smiled through it all while his blood boiled. Half an hour later, shouts erupted from the hall. Every single bandit had collapsed face first into their food, unconscious. Qin Song and I rushed in and slaughtered them all except the leader. I woke him up, tied him tight, and handed my sword to Zhao Chong. His wife, his revenge. Zhao Chong pulled down the leader's pants and cut off exactly what you'd expect. Then he fed it to a village dog, who swallowed it whole without chewing. By evening, the village was cleaned up. I told the villagers to turn in the bandit bodies to the local government for the bounty money. They deserved compensation for what they'd suffered. As we left, Zhao Chong knelt before me in gratitude. I pulled him up and said we were just doing our job as soldiers. Then he pulled me aside, embarrassed, and whispered a private request. After seeing what the bandits did to his wife in the hall, he'd been left with a certain psychological problem. He couldn't perform anymore. Did I have a cure? I sighed, patted his shoulder, and quietly gave him some medical advice. His eyes lit up like I'd handed him a treasure. On the ride back, we were in no rush. The mission was done with time to spare. Wei Qing reflected on how close Peach Blossom Village had come to ending up like Shuangxi. That hit home for me. 2 villages destroyed in just days, plus Yangzhen's village before that. What if bandits hit my own village while I was away? My 13 wives, defenseless. I made up my mind right then. I needed to build my own squad eventually. People I could trust to protect the people I cared about. I noticed Qin Song had been lost and thought the whole ride. When I asked what was bothering him, he admitted he'd overheard my private conversation with Zhao Chong about his bedroom problem, and he couldn't figure out the cure. I told him I'd share the answer if he owed me a future favor. Nothing illegal, just something I hadn't figured out yet. He agreed. I told him the solution. Just close your eyes and imagine it's someone else's wife. He slapped his forehead and called me a genius. What I really wanted from Qin Song was his brain. When the time came to build my own unit, I'd need a strategist. This kid was perfect. We arrived at the main camp of the Tian Battalion, over 2,000 soldiers stationed outside Fengxian County. The place was built like a fortress with hundreds of war horses. Commander Chao Tian ran the whole operation, responsible for feeding and supplying the army while dealing with bandits across the region, all on shrinking tax revenues from years of drought. Chao Tian received us in the command tent and commended our work. Then he turned to me specifically. He'd heard I knew medicine, a rare and valuable skill in an army that couldn't afford real doctors. He said he had someone who needed saving. He led me to a heavily guarded medical ward. When I saw the patient, my jaw dropped. It was the bandit chief I'd shot through the stomach, the one in the demon mask. Except under the mask, she turned out to be a woman in her 30s, and not bad looking either. She was barely alive, unconscious, with my arrow wound still gaping in her belly. I asked Chao Tian if he was joking. Why save a mass murderer? He explained he didn't actually want her healed. He needed her conscious long enough to extract intelligence. This bandit group was just one branch of a much larger network that had terrorized dozens of villages across multiple territories. Nobody could find their main base. This woman was their best lead. That made sense. I agreed to treat her, but warned it would take time given how badly she was hurt. Chao Tian offered me anything I needed. I said those were dangerous words in front of me. He reminded me this was the military, no empty promises. So I made my requests. I needed an assistant, specifically Yang Zhen from the recruits. And I need a big bed for the 2 of us. Chao Tian gave me a strange look when I asked for a big bed. He assumed I had special preferences regarding Yang Zhen, the male monk. I just smiled and reminded him he'd promised no questions asked. He sighed and let it go. Privately, I'm sure he was questioning his life choices. Yang Jun arrived within the hour with her things. She knew I was up to something, but staying with me in a private room beat sleeping with a dozen sweaty men who kept trying to check what was under her clothes. The worst I'd do was some wandering hands, and she'd gotten used to that. As long as I didn't cross the final line, she could deal with it. When she saw the patient, the bandit chief in a demon mask, she was shocked. Even more so when I told her it was a woman, maybe 30 years old. I explained Xiao Tian's plan. Keep her alive long enough to extract intelligence about the larger bandit network. I reminded Yang Jun that her family's killers might be connected to this same group. That convinced her to help. Turning the woman over to clean her wounds, we were both stunned. Her back was covered in scars, whip marks, knife cuts, even candle burn marks. On her shoulder was a tattoo of a dragon stretching across to her chest, but missing the head. I knew what that meant. In bandit hierarchy, only the top boss gets the full dragon. A headless dragon meant she was second in command. Young for that rank. We'd caught a big fish. I cleaned and bandaged her wounds, then had Yang Jun tie her securely to the bed. No telling when she'd wake up, and I didn't want a bandit leader getting loose while we slept. The days settled into a routine. Yang Jun and I had an excuse to skip daily drills. We were on medical watch. Every night we shared the bed. I kept my hands busy but never went all the way, and she grudgingly tolerated it. One evening, Yang Jun refused to share the bed. She looked pale and said her stomach hurt. I figured it out quickly, her monthly cycle. She snapped at me for asking. I told her I could actually help with the pain and asked her to undress completely and lie down. She thought I was insane, but she'd been suffering badly enough to try anything. She made me promise, if it didn't work, I could never touch her again. I agreed and placed my warm hand on her bare lower belly. In the darkness, a soft moan broke the silence, but it didn't come from Yang Jun. It came from the other bed. The bandit woman was awake. The bandit woman, Qin Hongyan, woke up in the dark and heard Yang Jun and me talking. Problem was, she could see the military camp through the window, and all she heard was me telling another man to take off pants. She assumed she'd stumbled into two soldiers doing something extremely unsavory and nearly threw up. Yang Jun heard the sound and froze. I was too distracted by her bare legs to notice anything. She insisted someone had made a noise. I sighed, told her to get dressed, and lit the lamp. Time to find out if our prisoner was really unconscious. I slid my hand under the bandit woman's shirt. She didn't flinch, tough customer. So I went for the nuclear option and shoved my hand straight down her pants. She exploded. What the hell are you doing? Oh, not pretending anymore. Please, continue. I was curious how a female bandit feels compared to regular women. She was furious at being tricked, but quickly shifted to defiance. She demanded I kill her, expecting the torture she knew Xiao Tian was famous for. I told her dying was too easy. I'd saved her life, and I could keep doing it no matter how many times she tried to hurt herself. If she bit her tongue, I'd sew it back. If she starved, I'd force-feed her. She wasn't getting out that way. She tried bribery next. Mountains of gold, power, status, all mine if I let her go. I countered with my own offer. Confess everything about her gang, cooperate with Xiao Tian, and maybe she'd get to live. I'd even put in a good word. Find her a handsome husband, settle down, have kids, live a quiet life. She laughed bitterly. That kind of peaceful life was a dream she'd had as a girl, before her hands got soaked in blood. There was no going back for someone like her. Even if Xiao Tian forgave her, the families of dead villagers never would. She called my offer a joke. I shrugged and said hers was the joke first. The moment I freed her, she'd cut me in half. Bandit promises weren't worth the air they were spoken into. We were at a standoff, but I had time, and she wasn't going anywhere. Yang Jun wanted to hand the woman straight to Xiao Tian for torture, or worse, let soldiers take turns with her. Qin Hongyan didn't flinch. She stared Yang Jun down and said she'd endured things we couldn't imagine. She practically dared us to bring war horses into the room. I decided not to think too hard about what that implied. I turned her over to Xiao Tian and went back to regular duty with the first squad. Yang Jun and I kept our private room in the medical ward. I argued that soldiers got hurt during training every day, so having a doctor on site made sense. It also meant we still shared a bed every night. 4 days later, Xiao Tian came to find me again. He needed me to save the bandit woman, again. He'd thrown everything at her, every torture technique the military had. She was beaten nearly to death, whipped with barbed lashes until her back was shredded meat. Yet she gave up nothing real. Every time she was about to break, she'd feed them a fake location. Soldiers would ride out, find nothing, come back, and the cycle would repeat. She'd burned through several interrogation teams. That afternoon, she'd given another false lead. Chow Tian lost his temper and ordered 30 lashes with the spiked whip. She passed out, but never begged for mercy once. I told Chow Tian his approach would never work. She was tougher than most men and more afraid of her own gang's retaliation than anything the army could do. Hard methods had failed. I suggested trying something soft. He was skeptical. His finest interrogators couldn't crack her, and I thought being nice would. I told him to let me try while he listened from the next room. He had nothing to lose. I walked into the torture chamber with my medicine box. Qin Hongyan was hanging from the rack, barely alive, her back a mess of torn flesh and old scars layered with fresh wounds. She didn't even open her eyes when I entered. "Whatever you've got, bring it," she rasped. "Whip me another 30 times. If I beg once, I'm a dog's daughter." Even in this state, she was still spitting fire. I had to respect it. I told her I was there to treat her wounds, not add new ones. She cursed at me and told me to get lost. But then I said something that made her freeze mid-sentence. "If you keep thrashing around, your old scars will tear beyond repair." And I was planning to fix those too. She went completely still. "What did you just say?" "You can fix my old scars. Even a bandit woman is still a woman." When I mentioned fixing her old scars, Qin Hongyan's defiance cracked for just a second. She warned me that if healing her was just a trick to extract information, the answer was still no. She'd rather stay ugly, rather die. I told her straight. I was treating her because orders said so, no strings attached. She studied my face, then agreed to let me work. I stripped the ruined clothing from her upper body to access the wounds. Her back was a horror show, fresh lash marks layered over years of old scars, burns, and cuts. The treatment took hours. I had to cut away dead flesh piece by piece with a heated blade, then apply medicine to each spot. She counted every cut, 1,321, she told me through gritted teeth. But by the time I finished and bandaged everything, the pain had been replaced by cool relief. She admitted I'd kept my word about not using the treatment as leverage. I told her not to relax too much. The interrogation wasn't over. It was just changing hands. "Mine now." She went tense again. I told her my methods would be nothing like Chow Tian's, but she'd remember them forever. Then I left to prepare. Outside, Chow Tian was waiting. He worried I'd undo my medical work by torturing her again so soon. I assured him my approach wouldn't reopen any wounds, then asked if the camp had any ice. He pointed me to the kitchen cellar. I came back with a block of ice and started carving. Qin Hongyan watched me with growing confusion, mocking my ice sculpture hobby. I carved 5 pieces of various sizes and shapes, then stood behind her and tightened the ropes holding her legs apart. That's when she finally understood. Her mockery died instantly. "Stop. Untie me right now." I reminded her she'd just said nothing could scare her. I told her I was a very gentle, considerate person. Then I tore her pants open, picked up the smallest ice carving, and unwrapped the cloth from it. The cold was so intense, even my hand burned from holding it. Qin Hongyan's face went white as snow. From the next room, Chow Tian heard the results instantly. One scream from Qin Hongyan told him my method was working where all his torture had failed. The ice was devastating. Not because of physical damage, it wouldn't leave a mark, but because of what it did to her mind. The cold penetrating her most sensitive area was a kind of suffering she'd never experienced. Whips and blades she could handle. This was different. I kept my voice calm the whole time. I reminded her that compared to what her gang did to the villagers of Shuangxi and Honglian, Yangzhen's village, this was nothing. Not even 1,000th of what those innocent people suffered. I told her about Yangzhen being the sole survivor of her village, watching parents get dragged out and killed. She tried lying first. Said she had no accomplices, that she'd built the gang alone. I picked up a bigger piece. She changed her story, said her partners had already left the region. I stared at her in silence. She admitted she was lying again. I mentioned switching from ice to iron. That broke her. By dawn, she'd told me everything. I stumbled out of the interrogation room exhausted. Chow Tian had waited outside the entire night. I told him I had the full picture, but needed sleep first. He sent me off with a hot meal and orders not to be disturbed. I ate like a starving animal, collapsed into bed, and slept until sunset. When I woke up, Yang Zhen was at the window watching soldiers drill outside. I grabbed her from behind and reminded her about her promise. Whoever avenged her family got her heart and body. She said the promise stood, no matter how long it took. I told her to start preparing. In the command tent, I laid everything out for Chao Tian. At least 3 major bandit groups were operating inside Fengxian County, each based on a different mountain. When they weren't raiding, they blended into the civilian population, farmers, merchants, ordinary people. When the call came, they'd assemble instantly into killing squads, then scatter back into normal life afterward. That's why nobody could ever wipe them out. They weren't hiding in the wilderness. They were living right next to us. Chao Tian's face went dark. He smashed his desk with one fist. From this moment, every soldier in the Tian battalion has one mission: total elimination of every bandit in Fengxian County. I want this land cleaned. Then he turned to me. Zhao Pingan, receive your orders. I blinked. What? I couldn't believe it. Chao Tian wanted me to lead the bandit hunting operation. Me, a recruit who'd been in the army for barely a month. His logic was simple. I was the only one who could handle Qin Hongyan. If anyone else led the team and she fed them false information, soldiers would die. At least I'd know when she was lying. He also wanted 0 casualties. I told him that was asking a lot. He said if I didn't go, he'd eat me clean, military humor. He gave me 200 of his best, a mix of elite veterans and promising recruits including Qin Song, Wang Wei, Wei Qing, Li Jian, and Zhao Yao. He said it was practically his entire reserve. He had no choice. 2 villages slaughtered on his watch would destroy his reputation and invite rival warlords to swallow up his territory. Before leaving, I went to see Yang Zhen. She'd packed enough luggage for a vacation. I told her we were hunting bandits, not sightseeing, and handed her the custom armor Ding Ning had sewn for me back home. She loved it until I mentioned it was made by my wife. Her face fell, and she tried to give it back. I told her to shut up and wear it. I pinned her to the bed for one last attempt before the mission. She squirmed and protested. Then Li Jian knocked on the door. Time to go. Li Daong caught me at the kitchen. He'd packed bundles of food from the cook staff's own rations. His wrists were bruised. He'd clearly fought someone to get them. He tried to play it cool, but his eyes were red. He told me I was the hope of our village, and to come back alive so we could all go home together someday. My nose stung. In 3 years in this world, nobody had ever said anything like that to me. I dosed Qin Hongyan with a muscle-weakening powder I'd made. Not lethal, just enough to keep her too weak to run or fight. She called me shameless. I reminded her about the ice. She went quiet. 200 soldiers marched out of camp. We split into 2 groups to avoid attention. 100 with me, 100 with a veteran officer named Ma Zhao. We'd reunite at the first target, Blackwater Cliff, where a bandit leader called Lone Tyrant ran a gang of about 100 men from a fortress perched on top of a cliff hundreds of feet high. Only one path up. The place was practically unassailable. Qin Hongyan warned me not to attack. She said even 2,000 soldiers couldn't take that cliff, and if I angered the bandits, they'd retaliate against every village for 100 miles. I told someone to gag her again. 2 days later, we reached the cliff. It was exactly as bad as she described. Sheer walls, one narrow path, dense forest cover on top. But there was also a village at the base, about 60 families. The bandits used the villagers as their eyes and ears. I needed to scout first. I picked Qin Song, Li Jian, and Wang Wei to come with me, plus Qin Hongyan on a leash. She smirked and asked if I wasn't worried she'd sabotage us on her own turf. Fair point. I had Wang Wei tie her hands and keep her on a rope behind us. Any tricks, and she'd regret it. We reached the village at the base of Blackwater Cliff after dark. I knocked on a gate with Qin Hongyan, Qin Song, Li Jian, and Wang Wei behind me. I introduced myself as a traveler heading to visit relatives, with my wife, who'd fallen ill and needed rest. The 3 guys were my brother and servants. A villager named Go Wazi opened the door. His eyes went straight past me to Qin Hongyan. I caught the hunger in his look immediately. Not the kind a man gives a passing stranger, but the kind a man gives something he wants to take. They were suspiciously welcoming. Too friendly for a remote village that lived under bandit control. The yard was full of villagers. They claimed it was a meeting. After they settled us into a room, I noticed everyone kept staring at Chin Hongmian with an odd intensity. Something was very wrong. After Go Wazi left, I followed him silently across the village. He went into another house where the village chief and several men were waiting. I jumped onto the roof, peeled back a tile, and listened. What I heard made my blood chill. The bandit leader, Lone Tyrant, had demanded 3 pretty women from the village. The villagers didn't want to sacrifice their own, so they'd been planning to kidnap women from neighboring villages and deliver them instead. They'd even identified 2 16-year-old girls from a nearby settlement. Then we showed up with a beautiful wife. Go Wazi was grinning ear to ear. He told the group my arrival solved their problem. They'd kill me and my companions in our sleep, take Chin Hongmian, grab the 2 girls from the other village, and hand all 3 to the bandits. One young villager named Yuan Qingshan protested, saying this was murder, no different from what the bandits did. Go Wazi shut him down. If they don't die, we do. Then he told everyone to go sharpen their knives, sharp enough to kill before the victims could even scream. I crouched on the rooftop in the dark, listening to them plan our murders. These weren't bandits. These were ordinary farmers, twisted by years of living under a monster's boot until they become monsters themselves. I was furious. These villagers had been planning to murder us in our sleep and hand Chin Hongmian to the bandits as a gift. I followed Go Wazi to his knife-sharpening session, dropped down behind him, and started clapping. Keep sharpening. Can't chop my head off with a dull blade, right? He panicked, then attacked me with the knife. I kicked him across the room. The young one, Yuan Qingshan, was shaking too hard to fight. I told him to drop the knife, and I'd let it slide. He did. But then the village chief appeared at the door with bad news. While I'd been eavesdropping, Chin Hongmian had escaped her guards. She'd asked to use the toilet, and in those few seconds, she'd contacted the villagers and revealed she was connected to the bandits. Now my 3 men had knives at their throats. The woman was smarter than I'd given her credit for. She stood there smirking, ordering the villagers to kill us all. She promised the bandit leader would compensate them for any losses. The village chief hesitated. Killing soldiers was treason, punishable by death for the entire extended family. I saw my opening and talked fast. I told them Chin Hongmian was just my runaway wife I'd bought with money, nothing more. I admitted being a soldier, but said we were passing through on our way to a different bandit hideout, not Blackwater Cliff. I asked the chief if he really thought 200 men would be stupid enough to attack an impregnable fortress. Then I got serious. I told them the difference between the army and the local police. Cops need evidence. The military just needs a location name. If word got out that this village had killed soldiers, the army wouldn't send investigators. They'd send an army. The chief crumbled. He dropped to his knees, and every villager followed. Chin Hongmian stood there alone, her escape plan in ruins. She admitted I'd won this round. Then things got more complicated. 2 men ran in dragging a pair of terrified 16-year-old girls they'd kidnapped from the neighboring village. The other 2 women meant for the bandit leader. The timing couldn't have been worse. I calmed the girls down, told them I was a soldier and they were safe. I asked them to stay temporarily because I needed their help with something. I'd send word to their families. I put the whole village on lockdown. No one in, no one out, no going up the mountain. I told the chief I'd originally planned to hit a different target first, but seeing the situation here changed my mind. Blackwater Cliff was getting dealt with now. The old man called me a great lord. I corrected him. I'm not your lord. I'm a soldier, and I'm here for 3 things. First, wiping out bandits. Second, wiping out bandits. Third, wiping out more bandits. That night, I went to deal with Chin Hongmian. She was tied to the bed, gagged, lying on her injured back. I removed the cloth from her mouth, and she immediately cursed me. I told her she owed me a punishment for nearly getting my men killed. She tried to act tough, said I should be afraid of her, that she'd hidden dangers in her body, that she'd drain me dry. I untied her ropes and told her that tonight she'd learn what it meant to truly submit. What followed lasted until dawn. The entire village heard every sound. In the morning, she lay there gasping, unable to move, and punched my chest weakly, calling me a bastard. She accused me of taking drugs. I told her it was pure natural talent. She refused to admit defeat and challenged me to a rematch when she recovered. I told her she was insane. My system panel showed an increase. Shin Homyan hadn't been a virgin, so no new skill or lifespan, but the endurance and potential stats ticked up slightly from the experience. When I stepped outside, Qin Song, Wang Wei, and Li Jian all had dark circles under their eyes. Nobody in the village had slept. Wang Wei snapped at me before I could even ask. Qin Song sidled up and asked how the female bandit tasted. I offered to let him try. He declined instantly. I got down to business. I sent Li Jian to check on our main force outside the village and ordered them to quietly surround the area, catching anyone suspicious trying to leave. Wang Wei fetched the village chief for a strategy meeting. I told Yuan Laosan I needed a guide to scout the mountain path up to Blackwater Cliff. I had to see the bandit fortress layout before planning any attack. The old man panicked. Villagers never went up the mountain uninvited. Anyone who tried without permission would be killed. Then someone unexpected stepped forward. I'll go. It was Go Wazi, the same guy who'd been sharpening a knife to kill me hours earlier. Go Wazi explained himself. No parents, raised by the whole village. Everything he did was for their protection. Killing me last night, volunteering today, same motivation. Qin Song nudged me and said we just needed to watch him closely. I agreed. We packed 3 loads of supplies, grain and meat as a cover story, and set out at dusk. I deliberately chose that timing so we'd have an excuse to stay overnight and scout the fortress layout. The mountain path started wide, but narrowed to single-file width near the top. By the time we reached the first checkpoint, the village below looked tiny. 2 armed bandits blocked our way with drawn bows. They told us to drop the goods and get lost. Qin Song jumped in with our prepared story. The bandit leader had demanded 3 women, and we'd found them, but wanted to confirm they'd meet his standards before delivering. The guards perked up. Their boss had been complaining about stale company. They told us to wait while they reported up. Half an hour later, we got clearance. After a pat down, we continued up and suddenly the path opened into a massive hidden cave behind a wall of giant trees, completely invisible from outside. Inside, it was a fully functioning base. Torches lined the walls. Dozens of bandits were drinking and gambling in sectioned-off rooms, and a stable held about 80 horses. The place was practically a palace compared to how regular people lived. No wonder men chose this life. Then I saw the women. Several naked, hollow-eyed women being passed around by squad leaders. One bandit cursed and shoved a woman away, complaining she was like a dead pig, and handed her to a group of lower-ranking men huddled in a quarantined corner. When those men dropped their pants, I saw why they'd been isolated. Their lower bodies were covered in festering sores, practically rotting. I told Qin Song and Go Wazi to stay far away from that section. A man called Third Boss noticed us and ordered us to follow him to meet the leader. He warned us not to look around or wander, or we'd die without knowing how. I kept my face blank while memorizing every detail: entry points, guard positions, weapon storage, horse count, structural weaknesses. This was exactly what I'd come for. We were led deeper into the mountain to a torchlit meeting hall where a dozen tattooed, scarred lieutenants waited. Then the boss himself appeared, Lone Tyrant. A wiry, muscular man around 40, shirtless, covered in battle scars, walking with a limp and a cane. A cripple running a bandit empire from an impregnable fortress. Not what I expected. I introduced myself as Yuan Qingshan from the village and told him we'd found his 3 women. 2 16-year-old girls, fresh and untouched, plus a 30-something woman who was definitely exciting. His eyes lit up like lanterns. He clapped my shoulder and said he trusted anything the village sent. I suggested we'd need to wait until morning to bring them up safely. The mountain path was too dangerous at night. He agreed immediately and ordered us put up for the night with food and drink. Perfect, exactly what I wanted. A whole night to scout. But as we walked away, my ears caught his quiet order to his men. Watch these 3 closely, don't let them wander. They locked us in a small stone room. Guards patrolled the tunnels outside. Qin Song came up with a plan fast. He started making loud eating and drinking noises as cover while I slipped out. I clutched my stomach and told the guard I had food poisoning from spoiled meat. He bought it and led me to the latrine. 2 holes carved into the cliff face, dropping straight down into the abyss behind the mountain. The guard mentioned the bottom was just a sheer cliff with nobody around. I filed that away, then knocked him out cold with one punch to the back of the head. I swapped clothes with him, smeared dirt on my face, and headed into the tunnels to scout. I didn't get far before running into two patrolling guards who demanded a password. I had no idea there even was one. I'd knocked out my guide before asking. Thinking fast, I turned around with a grin and launched into the longest, most confusing tongue twister I could remember from my previous life. Something about thick legs and round eyes that made absolutely no sense. The guard stared at me, completely lost. What the hell are you talking about? We can't understand a word. I punched them both in the face before they finished the sentence. Down they went. After hiding them, I ran into two more guards. This time I went first. Stop right there. Password. Give me the password or I'll kill you both right now. They looked at each other, completely bewildered. Wait, that's supposed to be our line. How come you're asking us? The two guards reluctantly gave me the night's password. Tonight we hunt deer. I memorized it, then acted offended that they'd hesitated, claiming Lone Tyrant had personally recruited me. They immediately started treating me like a VIP. I asked them to show me around the fortress since I was new. With these two idiots as escorts, I had free passage everywhere. Whenever other guards stopped us, my two guides vouched for me. Within an hour, I'd mapped the entire mountain stronghold in my head. Guard rotations, weapon stores, tunnel layout, escape routes, everything. Then we passed a section completely different from the rest. A small courtyard with flowers and a pleasant fragrance. Lone Tyrant's private quarters where he kept his dozen stolen women. My guides went pale and tried to steer me away. They explained the boss's favorite woman, called Peach Blossom, was beautiful but terrifying. The last man who peeked at her bathing had his eyes gouged out on her orders. Right on cue, the courtyard door opened. A woman stepped out wearing very little, her long bare legs gleaming in the torchlight. The two guards froze and dragged me behind a boulder. But she'd already spotted us. She started taunting from the other side of the rock, daring us to come look. Then she dropped her outer dress at our feet. Then her undergarment. She announced she was completely naked and invited us to do whatever we wanted. The scent coming off her clothes was intoxicating. Then she heard the guards call me Qing Shan, and her whole body went rigid. She rushed around the boulder and grabbed me, staring into my face with desperate intensity. But whatever she saw disappointed her. I wasn't the Qing Shan she was hoping for. I caught the word. Also, she'd said, "You're also called Qing Shan?" That meant someone with that name mattered to her. Interesting. When I told her I was from the village below, she trembled but quickly covered it up, switching back to her seductive act. She invited me to her room for a proper look. The two guards were on their knees, begging me with their eyes not to go. They were convinced she'd destroy me. I told them to head back while I handled this alone. They fled gratefully, certain they'd never see me alive again. She warned them to forget everything they'd seen. Then I scooped her naked body into my arms with a grin. "Let's go to your room. I want to take a very close, very thorough look." I carried Peach Blossom into her room and pushed her onto the bed. She kicked me off hard and demanded to know who I really was. She knew I wasn't the real Yuan Qingshan. I pressed her again to test whether she'd truly given in to life as a bandit's wife. She broke down. "Is my husband alive? Has he remarried? Does he still remember me?" She was genuine. Years trapped in this fortress, forced to serve the bandit chief, and she'd never stopped thinking about her real husband. The hatred she couldn't direct at Lone Tyrant, she'd taken out on the lower-ranking bandits instead. That's why they all feared her. I asked what she'd give me for the information. Without hesitating, she lay flat on the bed and spread her legs. "Do whatever you want. He won't find out. I'll admit the view was tempting. But this was Qingshan's wife. I have standards. I don't eat from another man's plate, especially a man I know." She got confused and angry. "You want me but you think I'm dirty? Make up your mind." I told her I wasn't after her body. What I needed was much simpler. Tomorrow, Lone Tyrant would be celebrating his new women. I needed Peach Blossom to keep him and his top lieutenants distracted and in one place for as long as possible. In return, I'd reunite her with her husband. Her eyes went wide. She agreed. Back in the stone room, I laid out the real plan to Qin Song and go Wazi. The front path was suicide, one narrow trail that a dozen men could defend against thousands. But I'd found the back door, the latrine shaft dropping down the rear cliff face. Almost vertical, no guards whatsoever, because everyone assumed it was impossible to climb. I told them that when we went down the mountain tomorrow morning, one of us had to stay behind, hidden in the fortress. At nightfall, that person would lower a rope down the back cliff. Our soldiers would climb up in the dark, completely undetected, and hit the bandits from inside. Chin Song stared at me like I'd lost my mind. You think you're a spider? Climbing a cliff on a single rope. The next morning, we left the fortress with only 2 people visibly walking. Me and Go Wazi, who carried a dummy dressed in clothes on his back. The real Chin Song was hidden inside the fortress, waiting for nightfall. At the checkpoint, I told the guards our friend had gotten drunk and passed out. They didn't look too closely. Back in the village, I prepared for the night assault. First, I talked to the 2 kidnapped girls from Zhang village. I needed them to go up the mountain with me as part of the delivery to keep our cover story intact. They were terrified, but I promised I'd protect them and explain that freeing every village in the area from these bandits depended on tonight. They looked into my eyes and agreed to trust me. Then I dealt with Chin Homyan. She'd be going up too, as one of the 3 women being delivered. She smirked and threatened to warn Lone Tyrant. I hit a pressure point on her neck and knocked her out cold. She'd sleep until morning and couldn't betray anyone. Outside the village, our 200 soldiers gathered. I explained the plan. Climbed the back cliff using a rope that Chin Song would lower from inside the fortress at nightfall. The reaction was exactly what I expected: outrage. 100-foot vertical cliff on one rope? Are you insane? Where do we even find a rope that long? Even if we could climb it, our arms would give out halfway up. This kid is probably a bandit spy leading us to our deaths. The veterans were furious. Even Li Jian and Zhao Yao couldn't defend me because the plan sounded genuinely crazy. Only Yang Jin spoke up, face red with anger, insisting I wasn't what they said. The soldiers mocked her for always being glued to my side. 2 men, how suspicious. I told everyone to trust me and wait. I had all afternoon to prepare. When evening came and the troops marched to the base of the rear cliff, they were still grumbling. Ma Zhao, the veteran squad leader, suddenly raised his fist to halt the column. He pointed up. Every single soldier looked toward the top of the cliff and went completely silent. How in the world did he do that? What they saw was a massive spider web of ropes stretching across the entire cliff face, with anchor points hammered into the rock at regular intervals. I'd spent the afternoon climbing the single rope Chin Song lowered, then weaving it into a net, using my light as a swallow ability to move across the vertical surface like a spider. Every few feet, I'd jammed the rope into cracks in the cliff to create solid footholds. The result was a climbing net that could hold dozens of men at once without breaking. I dropped down to the base and told Ma Zhao, 15 minutes to climb, normal speed. I'd go up first with a small advance team. When they saw bright fire on top of the cliff, the main force should start climbing. I grabbed Yang Zhan, the village men including Go Wazi, the 2 girls, and the unconscious Chin Homyan, strapped her to my back like she weighed nothing, and headed up. Inside the fortress, Peach Blossom was doing her part perfectly. She'd transformed into a flirtatious, submissive wife, teasing Lone Tyrant in front of his lieutenants, joking about his other women, keeping the mood light. She convinced him to break out 20 jars of wine and start a feast before the new women even arrived. By the time I walked in with the delivery, the entire leadership was already drinking. I presented the 2 trembling girls first. Lone Tyrant's eyes went wide. They were exactly what he wanted. Peach Blossom smoothly intercepted, saying she'd take the girls to her quarters to prepare them properly. Really, she was getting them to safety. Then I brought out the main attraction, Chin Homyan, still unconscious on my back. I turned her around so Lone Tyrant could see her face. The color drained from his skin. He nearly fell off his chair. That's impossible. He grabbed my collar and snarled. Where did you get this woman? You'd better explain right now, or I'll chop you into dog food. I'm not joking. He recognized her. Whatever connection existed between Lone Tyrant and Chin Homyan, it ran deep, and it terrified him. Everything went according to plan, almost. I told Lone Tyrant a story about Chin Homyan insulting him, calling him worthless, saying he'd obey her every command like a dog. His face turned dark with rage. He ordered her taken to his room immediately, too furious to eat or drink first. That ruined Peach Blossom's plan to stall him at the feast. But I signaled Peach Blossom to shift tactics. She couldn't hold the boss, so she'd focus on his lieutenants instead. As I, accidentally, bumped into her, I slipped the knockout powder into her hand. She poured it into the wine and toasted every senior bandit in the hall. They all drank. Within minutes, 24 of the fortress's toughest fighters were face down on the tables. I gave the order to light the signal fire in the main hall, the beacon for our troops below to start climbing the rope net. Then I went to save Qin Hongyan. She'd woken up on Lone Tyrant's bed with his hands already tearing at her clothes. She'd threatened him with their mutual boss, someone called Overturning Dragon, but he didn't care anymore. He was going to use her and kill her. I stepped into the room just as he was about to force himself on her. "Don't blame others for not taking you seriously," I said. "Blame yourself for never being worth taking seriously." He spun around, realized I'd tricked him, and exploded with fury. When he attacked, I understood why he'd ruled this mountain for years despite being a cripple. His fist cratered the stone floor where I'd been standing, a hole the size of a barrel, with cracks spreading like a spider web. This man was terrifyingly strong. I dodged everything, not daring to block directly. His second punch shattered more stone. He laughed and mocked me for running, saying I'd need a heavenly army to take his fortress. Right on cue, a panicked bandit stumbled through the door. "Boss, bad news. There's an army coming up the mountain." The battle for Blackwater Cliff went almost perfectly. Peach Blossom drugged the wine and knocked out 24 senior bandits. I lit the signal fire, and our soldiers climbed the rope net up the back cliff. The impossible route nobody believed could work. We hit the bandits while they were drunk, full, and half asleep. The fighting was fierce but short. Most bandits surrendered once they saw their leaders unconscious and their comrades falling. We lost about a dozen men. We captured 60 or 70 bandits, seized dozens of horses, and recovered a mountain of stolen goods. But Lone Tyrant was a monster. He punched craters in his solid stone and killed one of our veterans before I could stop him. I fought him with my Thunder Rush blade, buying time until the soldiers finished mopping up the small fry. When he saw his men surrendering, he knew it was over and bolted for the back cliff. I chased him to the edge, and when he jumped onto the rope net, I cut the main line. He fell with a scream, then silence. We found blood at the bottom, but no body. That worried me. Qin Hongyan was furious. I'd knocked her out, and she'd woken up on Lone Tyrant's bed with him about to assault her. I'd arrived just in time, but she cursed me for putting her in that position. Fair enough, I did feel guilty about that one. After the battle, I found Peach Blossom standing at the cliff edge, ready to jump. She said she couldn't face her husband anymore. Years with Lone Tyrant had ruined her, body and spirit. She was convinced Yuan Qingshan would be disgusted by her. I talked her down, told her I was a doctor and could fix the physical damage, restore her to how she was before. She broke down crying with relief. I told her to undress so I could start the treatment. What began as a legitimate medical procedure didn't stay that way. She lay on the grass under the stars, felt my hands working, saw me drooling, and whispered, "If you want to, just do it. One time only. Never tell anyone." I couldn't hold back. Under the moonlight on the cliff's edge, we went at it for over an hour. She said I was incomparably better than Lone Tyrant, and that she now hated me, because after experiencing the real thing, she'd never be satisfied again. What I didn't realize was that two people were watching from the bushes. Li Jing and Li Yin, the two 16-year-old girls from Zhang Village. They'd come looking for me about supplies and stumbled onto the show. They were hiding behind a tree, faces burning, whispering to each other about whether it looked painful or pleasurable. I spotted them with my night vision. One moment I was on the grass, the next I was standing right behind them. Enjoyed the show? The two girls spun around and found me standing right behind them. Completely naked. They screamed and covered their eyes. I was beyond the point of self-control. I told them if they were so curious, they should try it themselves. They said they weren't married yet. I said they could marry me. We'd handle the paperwork tomorrow. They both said yes. What happened next in that forest? Well, the girls cried from the pain at first, but it was done. On the grass nearby, Peach Blossom smiled to herself, saying at least she'd gotten to experience a real man, even if only twice. My system updated. Lifespan jumped to 11.5 years, 2 new skills unlocked. Perfect disguise, a face-changing technique that could make anyone look like someone else. And Treasure Eye, the ability to identify valuable objects on sight. My endurance hit 12. Back at camp the next morning, everyone knew exactly what I'd been doing all night. Qin Hongyan called me an animal. Ma Zhao, the veteran, pulled me aside and told me military rules required proper marriage arrangements. He'd write to Chao Tian, and the bride price would come out of my future pay. Fair enough. Down in the village, the reunion between Peach Blossom and Yuan Qingshan was everything I'd hoped for. The kid grabbed his wife and carried her straight to bed. Afterward, he told the neighbors she was exactly the same as before, thanks to my medical work the night before. Everyone believed her story about resisting lone tyrant all those years. She came to thank me with a pouch of copper coins, Qingshan's life savings. I refused. Military rules about accepting civilian gifts. As our hands touched, she gave me a look that said everything. If you ever come back this way, please visit our home. I'll take very good care of you. I coughed loudly and promised I would. I split our forces, 50 men to escort prisoners and loot back to camp, the rest to continue toward the next bandit hideout at Tunzi Gully. I needed to make a quick detour to Zhang village to formally propose to the two girls. Yang Zhen insisted on coming to supervise me. I knew she was jealous. What I didn't know was that on a hilltop overlooking our position, two horsemen were watching everything. One of them was General He Kuei, the man Hong Lu had warned me about. He was connected to the bandits, taking tribute from the gang leader called Overturning Dragon. He'd been tipped off by the shop owner I'd humiliated. He decided not to kill me yet, too risky on Chao Tian's territory. Instead, he'd let me walk into Tunzi Gully and make it my grave. Let him live 2 more days, He Kuei said with a cold smile. Chao Tian, don't blame me for what's coming. Blame yourself for sitting on land I want. Zhang village was the poorest place I'd ever seen. Made my old shack look like a palace. Li Jing and Li Yan's families lived in crumbling houses with holes in every wall. One father had a broken leg, the other was blind. Their mothers were barely in their 30s, but looked 60. I'd expected resistance about taking their daughters without a proper wedding first, but both families were overjoyed. Their girls had never known a day without hunger. Someone had tried to claim them before under the excuse of helping feed them, basically trying to get brides for free. I came with actual gifts and money. They couldn't believe their luck. I spent the day fixing up both houses, patching roofs, reinforcing walls, making them livable. That night, I stayed with the girls. Li Jing shyly called me husband for the first time and offered to try again despite the pain from the night before. She said since I was leaving tomorrow, they wanted to endure it. This time was different though. Once the initial sting passed, both girls started to understand what Peach Blossom had been experiencing. By the end, they were enthusiastic participants. Next door, Yang Zhen was stuffing her ears and cursing me. Qin Hongyan, who'd apparently figured out Yang Zhen's secret, offered to teach her a technique women could use without needing a man. Across the hall, Li Jing's parents heard everything too. Her father bragged he'd been just as vigorous in his youth. His wife told him to stop lying. She'd be impressed if he could last a count of 10. They decided to compete with me. Their noises drifted over, and somehow the rivalry made me go harder. Strange night. In the morning rain, I tucked the sleeping girls under blankets, left money and instructions with the parents, and set out with Yang Zhen and Qin Hongyan toward Tunzi Gully. The muddy road was miserable. Both women's clothes were soaked through and clinging to their skin. Qin Hongyan finally stopped and refused to walk another step. Yang Zhen, for once, took her side. I agreed to find shelter. A few miles ahead, we spotted a roadside inn at a 3-way crossroads. Qin Hongyan rushed in and ordered hot soup and 3 baskets of meat buns. A plump-faced woman brought them out fresh from the steamer. The smell was incredible. I grabbed a bun, tore it open to add some dipping sauce, and froze. There was a hair inside the bun. A curly one. I stared at it on the table, and my stomach turned inside out. Qin Hongyan had already wolfed down her entire bun before I said anything. When I held up the curly black hair, she froze mid-chew. Then she started checking the other buns and found a fingernail inside the meat filling. Stop eating, she told Yang Zhen. These aren't beef buns. They're human meat. Yang Zhen went white and threw up everything in her stomach, bile and all. Qin Hongyan held it together for about 3 seconds before she started retching too. The smell was unbearable. The plump innkeeper strolled out from the kitchen, smiling. She was impressed we'd figured it out and asked how. I told her. The hair was curly and black, identical to hair from a very specific part of the human body. She laughed and said I must have seen plenty of women naked to know that detail so well. Her name was Xie Sanyang, Mother Hell King, in the underworld. Qin Homian recognized the name immediately and told us the story. Sanyang had been a rich man's daughter who married the wrong man. He killed her parents, stole her fortune, brought other women home, and turned her into a servant. She finally snapped, poisoned him, chopped him into bun filling, and fed him to his mistress. The mistress went insane. Sanyang had been running human meat bun shops ever since. 3 years at this location, and nobody who stopped here ever left alive. She clapped her hands, and 2 knife-wielding men came out of the kitchen. Both were skilled fighters, good enough to keep this operation running without anyone catching on. I drew my military sword. When Sanyang spotted the army-issue blade, she asked if I was a soldier. Yangjin told her she should be scared. Sanyang laughed and said she'd never tasted soldier meat buns before. The 2 men attacked. They were decent with their cleavers, but once I unleashed my fully mastered Thunder Rush blade, they were outclassed within 2 strikes. They ran behind their boss screaming for help. Sanyang cursed them, ripped off her outer clothing down to a red undergarment, grabbed a cleaver in each hand, and charged at me herself. Her chest was extraordinary. I've got 13 wives and none of them come close to that kind of size. The sheer physics of it were distracting. I grinned and asked if her plan was to blind me with those 2 giant headlights. Sanyang came at me with 2 cleavers, swinging like a storm. Her technique was actually impressive, better than the 4 lustful bandits. She leaped into the air and brought both blades down in a move that cut off every escape route. For a split second, I was genuinely worried. But I had reach. I swung my fully mastered Thunder Rush blade in the sweeping thousands technique. If she kept coming down, my sword would cut her in half before her cleavers reached me. She had no choice but to abort midair, lost her balance, and crashed to the floor. I kicked both cleavers away, stepped on her chest, and put my blade to her throat. She was stunned. She said she'd heard of every notable fighter in Chao Tian's army and never once heard my name. When I told her I was just a new recruit, she couldn't believe it. She said I had the strength of a 3rd-rank martial artist. That was news to me. I didn't even know martial arts had a ranking system. We tied her up, searched the place, and found the horror behind the kitchen. A chopping board covered in ground human meat, leg bones floating in the slop pit, and a hidden basement that served as the butchering room. Yang Zhen threw up again. We found a few hundred silver taels, but Sanyang claimed she'd spent the rest on hiring men for her pleasure, 10 at a time. I asked if that's why her chest was so enormous. She offered to let me test whether she could crush me between them. We hauled the 3 of them to the magistrate's office in Apricot Blossom Town. The constables were grateful. They'd been searching for whoever was making travelers disappear along that road for years. When I gave my name, one constable flinched slightly before smoothing his face. Yangjin noticed it later and mentioned it seemed odd. I shrugged it off. Over dinner, I asked Qin Homian about the martial arts ranking system she'd mentioned. She explained, 9 ranks, 9 being lowest and 1 being highest. Below 3rd rank, you're nothing. 3rd rank means you can project blade energy outward. That's when you're considered a real martial artist. Above 1st rank, there are 4 additional legendary tiers she knew nothing about. So my Thunder Rush blade put me at roughly 3rd rank. Lone Tyrant was probably 2nd or 3rd. Sanyang was 4th. Interesting. I needed a better technique if I wanted to advance further. Just then, drums and gongs erupted from the street below. Court runners were shouting that 3 dangerous criminals had escaped from the town jail. Yangjin scoffed. What kind of prison lets people break out? Then we looked down at the wanted posters they were putting up. Yangjin's chopsticks hit the floor. The wanted posters were Xie Sanyang and her 2 cooks. The woman I'd just arrested had already escaped from jail. Yangjin's chopsticks clattered to the floor. I stayed calm. If that crazy woman wanted revenge, let her come. I'd send her back to prison a 2nd time. That night, I got 1 room with 1 bed for the 3 of us. Yangjin protested, especially since Qin Homian now knew her secret. I tossed them both onto the bed. Qin Homian for the usual treatment. Yangjin pushed to the far side to observe and learn. Just as things got started, someone banged on the wall from the next room. A woman's deep voice complained about the noise and challenged me to a competition. Her side had a man too, she said. Fine by me. We went back and forth for a full hour, each side escalating. Chin Hong Yin was practically dying under me, begging me to stop, but the woman next door kept matching every sound I made. I couldn't take it anymore. I threw on clothes and kicked open their door. There was no man, just one woman, alone, rocking the bed frame and faking all the sounds by herself. She burst out laughing. It was Zhan Honglu, the constable, now wearing her purple rank sash. I was furious. She thought it was hilarious. She threatened to tell my 13 wives I was cheating. I told her I didn't care. Men having multiple wives was perfectly normal. She gave up trying to win that argument. She'd actually come for a real reason. The local magistrate's office had contacted her about the Sanyang case, and she'd traced things back to me. But here's what she discovered. The magistrate himself was in on it. He'd deliberately freed Sanyang from jail, making it look like a breakout. The cell door had been opened from outside, but staged to look like an inside job. Even worse, the magistrate's surname was Wang, as in Wang Tingshan, the rich kid whose shoulder and face I destroyed in training camp. His family connections reached into this town's government. They'd released Sanyang specifically to use her as a weapon against me. That explained everything. Why Sanyang had barely any money stashed away despite years of business. Why she'd been so calm about going to jail. The magistrate had been taking bribes to let her operate, and now they'd weaponized her. Honglu said without hard evidence, we couldn't touch the magistrate. The only way was to recapture Sanyang and force a confession. Until then, the murderous bun lady was out there somewhere, waiting for the right moment to strike. Honglu made a scary face and said, deadly blow. I jumped. She laughed so hard, she almost fell over. After seeing Sanyang's massive chest earlier, I glanced at Honglu's comparatively modest figure and looked away. Once you've seen the ocean, a stream just doesn't impress. The next morning, I left Honglu to track down Sanyang and set out with Yang Zhen and Qin Hongyan toward Tunzi Gully, the real target, the headquarters of the most dangerous bandit leader in the region, Overturning Dragon. Qin Hongyan tried to talk me out of it. She said Overturning Dragon wasn't like Lone Tyrant. He commanded over 1,000 bandits, had skilled fighters, and controlled every village for miles. The entire population of the area worked with him. Every time officials tried to move against him, they failed because the locals tipped him off first. She warned me our 100-something soldiers would be walking into a death trap. I could tell she was torn. Overturning Dragon was her former boss, and apparently her former lover too, the one who'd given her all those scars on her back. But after what I'd done for her wounds, and our nights together, she didn't want me dead either. She was trying to protect both sides by convincing me to turn back. I refused. As long as these bandits existed, no village in Fengxian County was safe, including mine, including my wives and unborn children. When we caught up with the main force, I laid out my plan to Ma Zhao. Our troops would disguise themselves as merchants and enter the trading post area in small groups. I'd go alone, pretending to be a wandering outlaw looking to join the gang, and try to infiltrate from the inside. Cut the head off the snake, and the body dies. Ma Zhao called it suicidal. I agreed it was risky, but a frontal assault against 1,000 bandits with 100 soldiers was actual suicide. He reluctantly accepted. I left Qin Hongyan with Ma Zhao, still under the effects of my muscle-weakening powder. I told her if I died, nobody would protect her from the veterans who'd happily execute a bandit were criminal. She cursed me, but I caught a flicker of worry in her eyes. I changed into outlaw clothes, bare chest, wild hair, a big chopping blade, and headed for the relay station at Tunzi Gully alone. The station was a traveler's and run under the thumb of the local magistrate's spoiled son, Chi Tianlin. I watched from a corner table as this arrogant brat arrived on horseback, drunk, with his thugs. Old son, the stable hand, literally got on all fours to serve as a human step stool for the kid to dismount. Chi Tianlin went upstairs, looked down at all the dining merchants, then pulled his scam. He had his men distribute boxes of premium tea to every table as a welcome gift. Everyone smiled and accepted. Then he announced the price, 50 taels of silver per box. For tea worth a few copper coins. Nobody could refuse. This was the magistrate's son in bandit territory. Saying no meant trouble, or worse. I sat in my corner, watching this little parasite shake down honest travelers, and made a mental note. This whole region was rotten from top to bottom. The officials, the bandits, the merchants, all tangled together like a nest of snakes. I'd come to the right place, and I was going to burn it all down. The relay station at Tunzi Gully was my first taste of how rotten this place really was. I was eating alone in the corner when the local magistrate's son, Chi Tianlin, strutted in with his thugs. Old Sun, the stable hand, got on all fours so this brat could use his back as a step stool off his horse. That told me everything I needed to know. Chi Tianlin went upstairs, looked down at 20 tables of merchants, and pulled his con. His men handed out boxes of cheap tea to every table as a free gift. Then he announced each box cost 50 taels of silver. When a tough-looking man refused and drew his weapon, Chi Tianlin sent his thugs first. They got beaten easily. So he called in the magistrate's officers instead. They beat the man bloody with clubs, chained him, and dragged him away. Then Chi Tianlin grabbed the man's teenage daughter by the chin and announced he'd be taking care of her as a personal maid. After that display, nobody resisted. 20 tables emptied their pockets, over 3,000 taels total. Some merchants had to borrow money on the spot just to pay, going home in debt. The whole operation took less than half an hour. Then his lackey pointed out I hadn't paid. Chi Tianlin swaggered over and asked if I was enjoying my meal. I said the food was fine, but the establishment had a pest problem, stray dogs running around stinking up the place. He asked if I meant him. I said I meant him and all his servants. He flipped my table. I told him he owed me 5,000 taels for the food he'd just destroyed, 1,000 per dish. He sent his thugs. I knocked all four down with one swing of my sheathed sword and stomped one man's leg until it snapped. He called in the station's officers, 6 armed men. I put them all on the floor in seconds. One had his ribcage caved in and was coughing blood. The whole dining hall went dead silent. Everyone expected me to be arrested for attacking government men. But I didn't care. These weren't real lawmen. They were a criminal's private muscle wearing badges. What Chi Tianlin was doing to these travelers was worse than anything the bandits did. I sat on a stool with my foot on his back and gave him 30 minutes to send someone home for the remaining 2,000 taels. Every extra minute past the deadline would cost him a finger. I also ordered him to release the father he'd arrested. He was terrified, finally meeting someone who genuinely didn't care about his connections. He agreed to everything, stammering and sweating.